Welcome to the Fantasy Audiobook Library, a sanctuary of stories where fan fictions come alive, where ancient legends echo from the East and Western worlds awaken with wonder. Settle in. Your journey begins now.
Game of Thrones Traveling Thor Chapter 41. Honorable Fool, what madness has fallen on you to think of doing something like that? I all but shouted, barely holding back the anger which would definitely release the thunder that I still don't have much control over when Mjolnir is not around. I don't talk in air, Thor. I have proof. Queen's children are all bastards. They are. Ned Stark replied with a calm but authoritative tone and was continuing when I interrupted him. Odin's beard, not that. I couldn't care less about whose children those are. I'm talking about why in the 9 realms you told that to the queen, I asked with exasperation in my tone. I knew I was losing my cool, but this idiot wolf was testing my patience now. It was the right thing to do. Those children, bastards they may be, are innocent. If I had told this to Robert, he would have had their heads. The only way to protect those children was to have the queen get them out of King's Landing before Robert returns, Ned replied. And what about your children? Just see what happened to your friend. He's dead instead of the queen and her children. Don't you think your estimations are not on point? I chided, trying to show this fool some light. Robert's death has nothing to do with this. Ned Stark replied with a frown. Maybe he didn't like how I was talking to the high and mighty Eddard Stark, the Warden of the North. I considered you a wise man, Lord Stark, but even an idiot would have seen the signs which you in your high moral ground ignored. You tell the queen about her adultery and the next thing the king dies. Don't you see any connection? At this, Ned shut his mouth, which was definitely about to open and shout something about honor. After the king is dead, who do you think would stop her from doing whatever she pleases? She holds all the power. Do you think that she'll let someone who knows her secret, which could take everything away from her, live? I didn't give him time to think and asked again. She doesn't have power yet. The next king is yet to be crowned, and that's why I must go to the throne room with the king's will. With Robert's will to announce the rightful successor of the throne. Ned didn't even bat an eye and showed me a paper he was holding. You think a piece of paper can stop her from what she wants? That piece of paper holds no power. Ned, men with swords hold the power. You'll be walking in the lion's den if you go there. I shouted this time, trying to show this man reason, but his look told me everything. He wasn't gonna listen to me. Honorable fool. I can't let a bastard sit on the Iron Throne. It's my duty to the 7 kingdoms and hand of the king that I see justice done. Fuck the 7 kingdoms. First look for your own, would you? I showed you what's beyond the wall and here you are meddling with politics that the North has no say in, and wars to come that the North has no part in. What about your duty to the North and its people? This shut him up for a few seconds before he finally opened his mouth. My honor will not sit by and let a bastard take my friend's throne. The rightful king after Robert, in the absence of a legitimate heir, is Stannis. I owe him my sword and my loyalty. Ah, there it is. That's the reason I didn't bring Mjolnir with me, or I was sure Winterfell would be 1 Stark less in no time. I have seen enough to believe in my temper like I used to. One of the few downsides of being Thor, this impulse to solve everything with swinging my hammer. Have it your way then. I'll have no part in a fool's errand. I spat out in anger. Agree. Ned nodded far too willingly to this for some reason. Pardon. You can't come with me to the throne room. You will escort my daughters back to Winterfell. Ned said with firm eyes. And, pray tell, Lord Stark, why should I do anything you ask of me? I sent a glare at him. I'm not asking you as the Lord of Winterfell and the Warden of the North. But as a father. If there exists one man who I could believe in King's Landing to have the ability and character to keep my daughters safe, then it's you, Esser Thor. I'm not a Esser. But you are. Robert made you one, and now I ask. Nay, request, you to do what a knight does. Just take my children back home safe. That's all I wish, Ned Stark said with a slightly softer tone at the end. I just kept on looking at him with irritation building up. This man was infuriating. Honorable and just, but by the Allfather's beard, so fucking infuriating. I'll have the entire pack go back to Winterfell or none shall go. Go and start the war you can't afford, Stark. Forget about your daughter's safety. None shall touch even a single strand of their hair while I'm here, you have my word. Just as you have my word that the moment I take all of you out of King's Landing, I'm punching you right on the face. I glared and turned back. There was nothing else to talk about here anymore. Now I was sure that my plans wouldn't keep up with the changing tides. Things are happening way too quickly for my liking. It's not obvious, but the Starks were in King's Landing for almost 9 or so months before Ned Stark died. If Daenerys marrying Khal Drogo, getting pregnant, and almost giving birth was any indication. And what about here? Not even the second month has started and we are on the verge of starting a war between the Crown and the North. If Robb Stark is anything like what he was in the show, then things are gonna be bad soon if Ned Stark dies here. Not good for my plans. If I wish to play video games anytime soon, then I can't let Ned Stark die. Sigh. I'll have my punch, you have my word. However, now I have to secure the 2 little wolf cubs before Stark brings down the entirety of King's Landing, calling for his head and his daughters. Maybe a little visit to Lord Varys is in order. Chapter 42. Escape again. After talking with Stark, I immediately rushed towards the girl's room. The way Ned Stark was talking, it was clear that he would be confronting the Queen and others tomorrow. If I have to protect them, then I have to act now. While walking past the long corridors of the Red Keep, I look outside to see the darkness slowly fading. The night was almost over. None slept due to the king's death, and maybe none will get any sleep for the time to come. Increasing my pace, I came directly outside their room. Due to me taking Arya's pre-assigned room, now both of them were sharing one room. Knock knock. Nothing. Knock. Knock. Knocking again with more intensity. I waited until finally I heard some groans from inside. Who is it? Open the door, Arya. It's. I was saying, but even before that I heard a clang sound and the door swung open, only to be followed by a muffled yelp. Arya. Sansa glared daggers at the little girl who was grinning at me. I only needed one look to notice why. Sansa was furiously trying to straighten her hair out and if possible get into something more presentable than just her pajamas. Apologies for disturbing you this early, girls, but it's an emergency. Don't make noise and start packing your things quickly. We are getting out of here. I first look around to check if anyone was eavesdropping before getting inside and closing the door behind. We are going on an adventure. Arya's eyes, which didn't have a hint of sleep on them for some reason, lit up. Candles were utterly useless in this room with her around. I'm afraid not, child. Your father thinks that the city is soon going to be dangerous for either of you to stay here. He asked me to take you back to Winterfell. I replied with a sigh. Of course I didn't plan to take them back immediately. I had to wait until that fool lands himself in the dungeons before rescuing him out of there. Even one Stark less and the North will be at war. Not gonna happen under my watch. What? But what about father? Arya's face immediately fell. Meaning we both gonna travel back to Winterfell? Sansa broke in while still hiding away in the darkness trying to fix herself. Not sure what's going on in her mind early this morning. She has woken up. Yes. All 3 of us. Yes. Though I do have a slightly different plan, and if it works then maybe we could take your father with us as well. Okay then. Let's do that. Arya immediately said, not even waiting for the other option. Shaking my head, I just ignored her and turned to Sansa. Please be ready to depart within an hour. I'll be here before the sun's out. Make haste and make sure to cover your faces. We don't want anyone seeing you too. I said and was ready to get out when suddenly I heard this. Wait. I turned back, seeing Sansa hesitate to complete her sentence. What about my betrothal with Prince Joe? Sansa said with such a small voice that if this was the noisy morning in King's Landing after the sun came out, then none would be able to hear her. Sansa hesitated for some reason, maybe because seeing this was Thor, her heart wasn't sure what to do. She remembers all her expectations crashing down when in the tourney he made Myrcella the Queen of Beauty and Love. But she still didn't want to believe that there was no chance. Saying Joffrey's name in front of him felt. For all intents and purposes, my dear, for the time being consider the betrothal called off. Right now going back to the North with our lives is our sole objective. I said and made sure to give Arya a look. Knowing how horribly foolish Sansa was in her early years, before practically getting raped, I hope that Arya keeps an eye on her. The last thing I wished for was her to run off to the Queen, requesting to stay here in the capital for the purpose of marrying Joffrey and giving him little princes and princesses. Sighing, I saw Arya look back at me, then back at Sansa before a look of recognition appeared on her face. Good, at least there is one Stark who is not an utter dunderhead. Be quick, I said and left. Now I have to secure a way out of the city for them. There is none who I can trust in the capital. The only way to really ensure their safety is to take them away from this damn city. But then I won't make it back in time to save that honorable idiot. If they are gone, then Cersei won't have any leverage to hold against the North, none beside Ned Stark himself, meaning they won't kill him. But that's really stretching it. Even in the original, Cersei never intended to kill Stark. She was planning on sending him to the Wall while keeping Sansa as a hostage in King's Landing to deter any war from the North. But she gave birth to someone like Joffrey. What's stopping him from doing the same here? I have to do something about it. From the Queen sending people after us when we go out, and from Joffrey doing something which would throw my plan in a wrench. For the time being, though, I must find Mr. Dancing Master. Definitely could use some of his help right now. North. Robb Stark rode hard, the cold wind biting at his face as Castle Black came into view. He wasn't alone. Esser Roderick, Theon, and a dozen Stark men rode with him, all tired but determined. The Raven from the Wall had been clear, Bran was found, and the Hound had been captured. Robb didn't wait. He had to see his brother with his own eyes. It was not just him though. If he didn't come here personally, then his mother would, and that would have been another fiasco he wanted to avoid if possible. However, by the time they entered Castle Black's gates, they saw men were running about, shouting orders. Men gathered in groups, whispering with fear on their faces. What's happened here? Esser Roderick asked a passing man in black. At first the man didn't recognize him, but after seeing the House Stark banners, they immediately straightened up. The man looked pale. They're gone, he said. Robb froze. What do you mean gone? Who's gone? A sinking feeling came to him. The man stuttered a little, obviously afraid to say the next thing. There was a break-in in the lower cells. When we checked in the morning, the Hound was gone. Suddenly another voice came. They saw it was from an older member of the Night's Watch. Robb's hands clenched into fists. What do you mean they? He didn't care about the Hound. Of course, he wished to see him punished, but Bran was who really mattered here. The boy is not here anymore. And then the man said exactly what Robb was fearing. We don't have evidence, but it has to be the Hound. He must have taken him after breaking out of the cellar. Everyone in the group stiffened at this, especially Robb, who was gritting his teeth. He had ridden day and night, hoping to bring Bran home. And now he was gone again. Theon swore under his breath. Esser Roderick looked grim. Search the area, Robb ordered. Talk to everyone. Someone must have seen something. Find them. We already sent riders. Don't worry, my lord, they will find the boy. They better. Chapter 43. An outcome so inevitable. Finding the small man wasn't easy. Syrio Forel, a former first sword of Bravos. Ned Stark hired him to teach Arya the water dancing. Good for her, since no matter how much she tried, the little twig wouldn't be able to do hack and slash anytime soon. Maybe there's only one girl out there who can. Brienne of Tarth. Now that was a knight I would like to meet one of these days. Arguably the only decent knight who actually cares about a knight's conduct. You must be Esser Thor. It's an honor to meet the one who defeated the mountain. They are calling you the Mountain Slayer, Syrio said with excitement. Though his tone and words didn't give away the grumpiness he was hiding from being forced to get up early. The pleasure is all mine. I've heard much about the first sword of Bravos, I replied, a little bashful for waking the short man this early, but I couldn't help it. I needed someone trustworthy to help me out. I would like to hire your services. I didn't wait much and directly came to the topic. Didn't have much time on hand. I have already been hired by the Lord Hand to teach Arya Child the water dance. Yes, I'm aware. Here is the rest of the reward you've been promised. I took out a pouch of gold and placed it near him, which earned me a curious and confused glance from him. Ned Stark has ordered me to take both of his daughters back to Winterfell. King's Landing is not safe anymore for them, I said, and saw his smile, mixed with a hint of irritation regarding the timing, stiffen a little upon hearing me. I need someone to help me protect them. I don't believe anyone in the city. You, however, I believe are trustworthy. As I said, I've heard about the first sword of Bravos. He didn't respond immediately. He pondered over it before finally nodding his head, just when I was about to put more money on the table. You sure? It will be dangerous. I'm a hired mercenary, Esser. My entire life is dangerous. You help us, and the rest of the 7 kingdoms might as well call for your head. Is gold worth courting death? Men never court death, good Esser. Death's call comes to us. And Syrio Forel, the former first sword of Bravos, has only one thing to say to the eternal peace. Not today. Throne room. The heavy doors of the throne room opened wide as Eddard Stark walked in with his guards. His face was calm, but his eyes were sharp. He knew that what he was doing wasn't wise. This would definitely put a target on his back. If not, he might even lose his life here in the south. Not even his bones would reach the north. But he had to do it. His honor wouldn't let him just sit by and let a bastard take the 7 kingdoms for himself. In his hands, he held a rolled letter, King Robert's final order, naming him protector of the realm until the true heir was of age. Well, of course he changed the last words of his friend, but only to keep the realm secured. On the Iron Throne sat Joffrey Baratheon, dressed in royal colors, a smug look on his young face. The Queen stood proudly beside him. Lords and knights lined the hall, many unsure of what was about to unfold. Ned didn't bow. He walked straight to the center of the room. I come with the last command of King Robert Baratheon, Ned said loudly so all could hear. His final words, sealed by his hand. Ned looked at Esser Barristan Selmy, the Lord Commander of the Kingsguard. I believe no one could question your honor in this room, Esser Barristan. I ask you to read the letter. Barristan stepped forward, took the letter, and broke the seal. He read the words aloud, his voice clear and steady. When he reached the part naming Ned as protector of the realm, the hall fell silent. Cersei's face hardened. She stepped forward, her eyes cold. Give me that letter, she demanded. Barristan hesitated but handed it over. Without blinking, Cersei tore it in half. Then again. But those were the king's last words, Ned Stark said with a little stunned face. The king is dead, she said. We have a new king now. Ned took a step forward. I won't let that happen. Then you are a traitor, Cersei replied without any emotion in her words. The queen kept on staring at Ned, but he didn't back down and went on to tell the truth about Joffrey's real parentage. Of course, this led to Joffrey asking for his head. Tension rose in the room. With a single motion, the queen signaled. Swords were drawn. The white cloaks of the Kingsguard turned on Ned. His northern men raised their blades in response. Steel clashed. The throne room erupted into chaos. Ned fought to protect himself, but he saw that they were outnumbered. One by one, his men fell. Now that he thinks about it, maybe Thor being here would have really helped. But for him, his daughter's safety was more important than his own life. Knowing that with Thor on their side, they would be safe, he was relieved. He didn't wish this to happen, but the fight was inevitable. The war coming would have been inevitable. His heart was still in conflict, however. Ned Stark still did what he has been doing his entire life. Do what his honor tells him is just. He saw his men dying. He brought them to their death. A sense of guilt spread onto him. He knew that even if he won, the outcome would be bloodied, and winning was unlikely. He brought all his men, northern men, to their deaths. Capture him. I'll have his head. Bring me his head, shouted Joffrey, pointing at Ned Stark, who was struggling now. He was outnumbered. Cersei, hearing this, immediately tensed up. She might be just as crazy as her brother. However, even she knew what would happen if Ned Stark were to die here. War would start. And unlike how she behaves, she knows that there are not many kingdoms who really support the Baratheon rule completely like they used to with Targaryen. They still needed North's support. She had to stop her lion from doing that. Not to mention she was also worried about where Thor was. By now, even the entire King's Landing knew that Thor might as well be the mightiest warrior the 7 kingdoms has ever seen. She definitely wasn't over-exaggerating because she got hot for him. So, him not being here unnerves her. In fact, she was especially worried about Thor. If he really fights, would anyone be able to stop him? Ned Stark sighed. He knew his outcome. Knew it even before he entered the throne room. He should have listened to Thor, but even now, he didn't regret anything. Nothing but one. That he brought his daughters to the south. Now he could only hope that Thor kept them safe. Surely the old gods won't be that cruel to demand my children's lives. Chapter 44. Bran gone again. Castle Black Robb stormed into the room where Jon was sitting, his face stiff with frustration and worry. Snow, he said sharply, I need answers. Jon stood up quickly, confused by Robb's sudden entrance. He didn't even know he was coming, but now that he thought about it, him being here made sense. In terms of his father's absence, he should be the one taking action after all. Stark, Jon replied, already knowing why he was here. Bran and the Hound are gone, Robb said. When we got here, the Night's Watch told us they escaped. But I need to know what really happened. Did the Hound take him again? Jon shook his head, looking serious. No, Robb, it's not what you think, Jon replied with a complicated expression on his face. He knew that Bran was missing again, but this time he wasn't sure it was the Hound who kidnapped him. Earlier, when he learned that Bran was missing through the Raven from Winterfell, he was worried sick. Though between his younger siblings he liked Arya more, Bran was still his brother. Robb narrowed his eyes. What do you mean? Is he not gone? Is Bran here? Jon shook his head. No, he's gone. What I mean is that I spoke to him after he arrived. We caught him with the Hound and brought him here. I was so relieved to see him safe. But it wasn't exactly what I expected it to be, Jon replied while thinking of the conversation he had with Bran before he ran away. Robb stared at him, silent. Jon continued, I asked him what had happened. Turns out the Hound didn't take him out of Winterfell. He willingly left. What? Flashback. Jon sat at the edge of Bran's cot in the infirmary. Bran looked up at him, his face scrunched up with frustration. They put him here even though he was completely unharmed. Bran, I thought you were taken. Everyone did. What happened? Jon asked softly, for the time being not talking about their small argument about the medical checkup from Maester Aemon. Bran looked down at his hands, then slowly said, You have it wrong, Jon. Those men didn't even listen to what we had to say before they captured the Hound. I wasn't taken. I left Winterfell on my own. Jon blinked, felt like he heard it wrong. He clearly remembered that the letter from Winterfell clearly expressed that the Hound kidnapped Bran. Have you gone mad? Jon finally said with a hint of anger in his tone. I had to, Bran said. I was having dreams, visions, of the three-eyed raven. Of something terrible coming from the north. I knew I had to go beyond the wall and find the truth. Jon stared at him, stunned. What dreams? Bran, last time I saw you, you were fighting a fever. Do you understand how worried everyone in Winterfell would be? Jon said but got interrupted by Bran. They wouldn't have let me go. Not Mother. Not Robb. Not anyone. They'd think I was mad. This is madness. Jon chided. Jon, Bran wanted to explain. No one believed him, but maybe Jon, if he tried to explain. However, Jon wasn't in the mood to listen to excuses. And the Hound? He asked. Bran pursed his lips. I ran into him on the way. I lost my pony. Wildlings almost caught me. He saved me. At first, he didn't want to help, but I convinced him. More like blackmailed him, but of course, he wasn't going to say that out loud. Jon raised an eyebrow. You were attacked by wildlings? He asked, almost alarmed. Bran gave a tiny smile. He saved me. I told him what everyone in Winterfell would eventually think, that he kidnapped me. He didn't like it, but to avoid being captured by Robb, he decided to come here first. Jon let out a breath. Bran, that's dangerous. I know. But it had to be done. The danger beyond the wall is real, Jon. The things I saw in my dreams, they're coming. Nothing is coming, Bran. It's in your mind. You were sick, its effects lingers. You need to go back to Winterfell, do what Maester Luwin asked of you. Jon said slowly, almost consoling him to calm him down. He wasn't sure what dreams Bran was having, but ultimately those were just that, dreams. Since he hadn't seen what was inside the cellar yet, he didn't believe in the great danger beyond the wall or anything supernatural for that matter. The Hound doesn't deserve to rot in a cellar. He helped me. Please, tell someone. Get him out. Bran gave up. He knew there was no way to make Jon believe him, or anyone for that matter. Not until he had proof. So what mattered more now was to save Sandor. Jon nodded. I'll see what I can do. Present time. So, you're telling me Bran ran away? Of his own will? Robb asked, struggling to believe it. Jon nodded. Yes. He was chasing visions. Dreams he believed were true. He wasn't taken by the Hound. In fact, Sandor saved him. Robb ran a hand through his hair, pacing the room. By the old gods, that boy, he's been talking about those dreams and reading those old texts ever since he woke up from that fever. We should have put someone to keep an eye on him the first time he asked to go north. I told the Night's Watch to check on the Hound and to move him out of the cellar, Jon said. As Bran asked for it. That's when we learned that he was missing. Bran too was gone. Robb sighed deeply, rubbing his temples. You think they're going north? Jon looked down. That, I don't know. Maybe Bran decided to continue his journey. Them entering beyond the wall from Castle Black is almost impossible. If they must go north, they would find a way from somewhere else. They shouldn't have crossed the wall by now. Robb stood up, exhausted but ready. Then I'll gather my men. Jon nodded. I'll come. He's my brother too. Chapter 45. To the dungeons, what's this place? I asked, confusion lingering on my face. After securing the two Stark girls' safety, I came back to the Red Keep to find a forgetful old spider who still owes me a debt of life. Targaryens were laced with many secrets, my lord. Even after their demise, we have yet to find them all. Some were buried with them, while some they left behind, Varys said in his usual sly tone. Speak clearly, Varys. I'm not in the mood to entertain your antics now. I shot him a look. Who would have thought that I'd be dealing with this man again so soon? But of course. You see, the keep is built above many secret passages such as this. It seems that even at the height of their power, the Targaryens always thought ahead, a secret passage to evade if ever the castle fell. For someone who called themselves dragons and rode real ones, for goodness sake, that's an awful lot of caution, don't you say? Varys smiled back. I just ignored him and looked at the dark entrance of the secret passage he brought me to. And you're certain that this passage leads us to the dungeons? I asked with a skeptical look. If these passages were really that big of a secret, then no one was supposed to know about them. Dealing with knowledge is my trade, my lord. I'm no lord. But you are, Sir Thor. I grumbled. I accepted many things about Thor, but this lord business, I couldn't, for some reason. Though maybe I was just being difficult for the sake of staying in the illusion that I'm still me and not a completely different person. I, for Odin's sake, couldn't say. But for the time being, I intend to oppose this notion to the very end. Why? I have no idea. This reminds me of how stubborn I was at certain times. Are you certain this would lead us to Ned Stark? I asked again. I found out that he was taken to the dungeons. Only then did I come to find Varys to take me to him. I could have just let Varys do it on his end, but I don't believe him. I am. He nodded. He looked serious enough. Very well then. Lead the way. He took out a fire torch, lit it up, and motioned for me to follow. This was one of those long wooden sticks with a flammable head attached to its top. I've seen many of these in games and movies. Another dose of motivation to work hard and get out of this world, at least until the time lightbulbs are invented. I won't settle for anything less. I quietly kept on following him. The place was like a maze, and the darkness didn't help either. We walked in silence. Didn't have much to talk about, but the darkness and silence were unnerving me. I wasn't the best person to estimate how much time had passed without having something to measure it. In this case, a watch, which this world lacked. Yet another reason to work hard for my goals. But I'm certain we walked for over 10 minutes, and I was getting irritated now. How far? Are we not there yet? Almost there, my lord. The place is a maze. Even someone with my experience would get lost here. Taking your time to reassess every turn would be wise. How come you know about these passages? I deal with knowledge, my lord. My little birds are everywhere. Even in Essos. Perhaps. What do you wish to know, Sir Thor? The answer depends on that. Nothing much. Just wondering. Why marry Daenerys Targaryen to the Dothraki? There definitely should be better options for your plans to stay on track, right? You amaze me every time I meet you, Sir Thor. Never thought someone else would have such awareness about the world as me. Don't flatter. I've got no need to gather news of these distant lands. I only do it so that I can find a way back to my own. Khal Drogo has an army of 40,000 Dothraki. A force needed to retake the throne for the young dragons. And what if she really did it? I know you never intended for those siblings to actually make it to the western shore. They are nothing but distractions. But what if she really does it? Then she'll be my queen. Just like that. Just like anyone in the Seven Kingdoms. What if she's like her father? Then the realm will burn. And you'll let that happen. Watch it burn. I'm but a humble man, Sir Thor. Neither a warrior like you nor a noble of any great significance. And yet you, a man from Essos, became one of the biggest players in this Westerosi Game of Thrones. We all play our part, my lord. Mine is that of a humble servant. For a man with so many eyes and ears, you sure sell yourself short. So do you, Sir Thor. He smiled and kept on walking again. I didn't bother asking anything more. There was no point. I knew he's better than me in this game. I wasn't getting anything worthwhile until I started threatening him, which I neither had time nor energy to do at this moment. Another few minutes passed, and finally he stopped. Here. I don't see a brooding Northman with a big long honorable stick up his ass. Ah, Sir Thor the Mountain Slayer actually knows how to jest. The wonders of this world never cease to amaze me. Where is he? I asked with annoyance. I could only see a wall in front of us. Behind the wall, of course. The dungeons are directly connected to this place. Now how do you intend to get past that wall, Varys? I asked with a dark face. Indeed, quite the predicament we find ourselves in. If only one of us was strong enough to break the wall down. Sigh. Such a shame, when we were so close to Lord Eddard Stark, he said with a mock sigh. Irritation flared within me, but I reined in my anger. My mind repeatedly suggested Stark wasn't worth this much, which he wasn't. But video games, internet, and fucking standard clean toilets, yeah, they kept me going. Back off. I walked forth and clenched Mjolnir tighter in my hands. Varys did just as I said. He backed off and refrained from talking. Ha! With a mighty swing, I slammed the hammer at the wall, earning a crack and a reverberating sound. Sturdier than I thought it would be. Another strike and the wall almost felt like it was on the verge of collapsing. One more hit would suffice. So with that in mind, I gripped Mjolnir in both hands and twisted my body to get the best leverage before hitting the wall hard enough to finally destroy it. But just as the wall collapsed, the entire area felt like it was shaking. I didn't like this one bit. Don't tell me. I snapped back at where Varys was to ask about the structural stability of these passages, but upon turning, I saw no one. What the? The fire torch was there, but no sign of the spider. However, I didn't have time to contemplate his absence, as I felt the entire place shake. Just before I knew it, things went blank. Chapter 46. Stuck north. Bran found himself back in the forest with the Hound. He was confused and a little scared, seeing this time he might really be kidnapped. Where are we going? He asked, but no reply came. He had been asking this from Sandor ever since he was literally picked like a sack of potatoes and dragged out of Castle Black, somehow, without alerting anyone. At least you can tell me where you're going. Not like I can tell it to anyone, Bran asked again, annoyed with the situation. Beyond the wall. And then suddenly the reply came, making Bran do a double take at what the big man said. Why? Bran, after staying quiet, more like not sure what to say in reply to that, finally asked. To which once again no reply came. He only got another grunt from the man before he moved on, making him follow him. Sighing, Bran just kept up with him. He didn't know what happened with Sandor, but he was not only acting different but also looking slightly different as well. There was a tense expression on his face, which one could only see if observed closely. Raven. After walking in silence for old gods knows how long, finally Bran heard his voice, making him snap his head to the big man walking in front of him in the forest filled with nothing but snow. Raven. The three-eyed raven. You saw it? He asked with a little excitement in his tone. For Bran, this was proof that he was not just following some wild dream he had, that what he was doing had meaning, that he wasn't hallucinating. I saw it. The raven. Bran asked. Something told him that Sandor wasn't talking about the bird. Not the raven. Sandor shook his head. He himself wasn't sure what to call that thing. Bran paused. There was no reason for his mind to go to the horror he saw in his dreams. But those exist beyond the wall. There is no way those things exist here, and yet his mind went to those walking dead. Keep up, boy. We have a long journey to cover. Suddenly Bran heard this and saw Sandor kept on marching forward with large strides. What did you see? Bran asked again. Now he had to know. Sandor didn't reply. He almost looked like he was afraid to talk about it, much like Bran had seen him acting in front of fire. Hammer. After a long time, finally the hound spoke. What? The hammer? Didn't you read that book? Tell me more about it. Bran squinted his eyes, confused why the man who still yesterday was calling him crazy suddenly became so interested in these old stories. He had two thoughts about keeping his mouth shut, treating the big oaf the same way he was doing to him. However, he restrained himself. Him knowing what Sandor saw was more important than the petty revenge he had the chance to get. What do you wish to know? Everything. King's Landing. Varys. Varys. Spider. You there? I shouted, and then shouted again on not getting any response. For Odin's sake, I was ready to bring down a storm, if not only for my low level. Should never have believed that bald fuck. I had a feeling that things were going way too easily for my liking. Just cash in on that last debt and he's just gonna deliver it to the door. Nope. The race of debtors are one of scums. Shaking my head, strange things were clouding my mind. After the ceiling collapsed, I thought I was done for. God might be, but I was still level 1 mostly. Not to mention, I don't believe even MCU Thor would be in good shape if an entire castle ended up falling on top of him. I was lucky though. Only the ceiling collapsed and blocked the way. I was mostly fine. When I didn't find Varys there, I knew he planned this. That wall was definitely an important structure holding this place up. Not important enough to bring down the entire castle, but still important. Darkness started to annoy me. When the ceiling fell, the fire torch got buried behind all the debris. I tightened my grip around Mjolnir and raised the hammer, only for it to give out a slight hum before it lit up. Not the thunder I was used to it emitting, but rather an eternal light which illuminated the entire area around me. It felt like the hammer itself was completely the same, but the light came out of it nonetheless. It's hard to explain honestly. This was one of the many little spells imbued inside Mjolnir which the MCU failed to show. There are many smaller things like this that Mjolnir could do. The hammer was much more than just for flying and smashing. In this regard, I do believe the MCU failed Thor in many ways. Thor is supposed to be more than a dumb fighter. Having his memories, I know him now enough to tell that at his peak, calling him a god wasn't that far-fetched. I had a pretty good notion that real base Thor level power is higher than the Thor we saw in MCU. At least my memories say so. So, it's either that this Thor template wasn't from MCU or the MCU's power scaling is off. Though I digress, I believe that the power scaling is right. It just doesn't stay consistent throughout. MCU must have nerfed him just like they did with Hulk. Sigh. Can't wait to level up. Back to the situation at hand though, the way I came from was completely blocked. I can certainly smash my way through, but I'd rather not tempt fate. Turning around, I could only see the unknown dark paths. I had a feeling that if I entered any of those, it would be almost impossible for me to find this place again. Odin's beard. With irritation, I brought forth all my Asgardian knuckle-headedness to pause my rational mind and walk forth, not pondering over what will happen after that. Chapter 47. Treasure. Okay, I'm officially lost. For hours I tried to find a way out of this labyrinth. Swear to Allfather that when I get out of this dungeon, I'm gonna squash that spider. Should never have believed him. This is all happening because of Stark. I better put more muscle behind that punch I promised him. Though for all that, I first have to get out of here. Another groan let out of my mouth before I got up again, ready to get further lost in this bottomless darkness. At least Mjolnir's with me. Did I just think of the hammer as a person? Sigh. Well, it can lighten up the place, so maybe it's not completely out of place. Time passed in here was lost to me. Thor's natural sense of time wasn't very good, and I have learned it firsthand. Makes sense when years would be hours for them. 100 years is nothing for someone who's gonna live for 5,000 years or so. As time went on, my anxiety was getting the better of me. Not the fact that I'll be lost in here forever, If nothing else, I could always try to break my way out of here. The anxiety was about Stark. If I don't find a way out of here, then he's done for. And so is my chance of getting to a more civilized time, at least without going through a pointless war which has nothing to do with me. For hours, I just kept on following the narrow dark routes, repeatedly hitting dead ends and suppressing myself from solving this problem like Thor would, with a lot of smashing involved. Until I smelled something. The place was smelly to begin with, trapped air and all, but this smell was different. It's like rotting flesh. I pondered, but that wasn't right either. Still, it was something, better than nothing. So for the first time, I decided not to use my eyes and gave my other senses a try to save the day. After another 3 dead ends, I finally found the place. And I could say that because this place smelled the most. However, after seeing what my nose found, I wasn't that motivated anymore. It was a skeleton. Not just one, but many. Lying here. Odin knows for how long. Were they trapped here as well? I sighed. After giving them another glance, I was ready to move on when I noticed something interesting. Something I might have never given a second thought before coming here. I noticed the clothes those skeletons wore, at least what was left of them, were not rags or porquility fabrics which most of the lowborn wear in the city. Curious, I got closer to examine the skeleton. I was not Lara Croft, but I could tell that these people would have been important in their time. So the question is, how did these important people end up getting trapped here? My knowledge of Game of Thrones was only up to the first few seasons, so I'm certainly not lighting up any bulbs inside my head from there. However, it's worth checking out what I'm dealing with here just in case. With that in mind, I looked around the area, trying to figure out who these people were. Maybe I could find a way out, at least a clue. Most of the skeletons were mere guards. The armor they wore and the clothes they had were enough evidence for that. So I skipped them all for the sake of finding the one they must have been protecting, or came down here to kill. And I found it. A relatively smaller skeleton with tattered clothing, no armor, which meant this person could be a woman. I searched and found an expensive-looking dagger. Not like the last one I had, so I was happy to pocket this one free of charge. But then I saw something the skeleton had in its robes that almost made me freeze on the spot. This, an oval object with a scale-like pattern on it. It looked like a rock if I didn't know better. Odin's beard. A dragon egg. Well, I shouldn't be surprised. This is, after all, the castle where Targaryens used to rule. It would be suspicious if there weren't dragon eggs around, right? It's sized almost similar to an ostrich egg, however, the patterns on it obviously told me that it was no egg of an ordinary bird. If it's really a dragon egg, then I certainly got something of a treasure here. As long as I can hatch this thing, that is. The red comet hasn't appeared till now, so maybe I got a chance. However, I've got no idea when. Sighing, I placed the rock-like egg aside and searched around a little more. Got nothing, but I did find something interesting. These skeletons, they had many of their bones broken. At first, I thought it just happened over time. Then I noticed a strange trend. It was their legs. All of their legs were broken. This definitely took me by surprise when I noticed the similarity. So, what could break all their legs together? Falling from a high enough place, I muttered to myself and looked up. Only now did I notice that the ceiling here was much higher than in those narrow lanes. Could it be? I shook Mjolnir a little and immediately the light it was emitting was gone. It took some time for my eyes to adapt to the absolute darkness of this place until my Asgardian eyes spotted an almost negligible hint of light up at the ceiling. The light wasn't much, but in the complete darkness, when knowing where to look, I caught it just fine. And that apparently was enough for me to break out in a big grin. Seems like it was fate for me to find you, my friend. I looked at the dragon egg in my hands and gave my best grin to it. But that grin didn't last long. When I brought back Mjolnir's light and measured just how high that ceiling was, I might have been saying this way too many times nowadays, but Odin's beard, chapter 48. Back in Red Keep it was night when suddenly a muffled sound spread across an empty hall room. In the silence of night, no one knew when a place where armor was displayed quietly shook, and more sounds of thumping resonated. Finally, after some time, the armor couldn't stand the constant thumping and toppled over, revealing an oddly placed marble in the well-polished and pristine floor of King's Landing. Before I knew it, I punched the opening one last time and it broke open, finally giving me a way out. That was much harder than I thought. I pulled myself up before flopping down onto the marble floor and taking a deep breath, finally inhaling some quality air for once. Climbing that wall with a dragon egg and Mjolnir, plus breaking open the secret entrance, took way too much from me than I anticipated. That was a steep and long climb. No wonder those people all broke their legs. Once I looked around me, I figured that I was in one of the halls of the Red Keep. This further cemented my idea that those people were important. Not just anyone would have a dragon egg with them after all. Dare I say, I found a Targaryen corpse down there. A long forgotten one at that. Musing aside, I quickly got up, ready to find my way out of here. However, maybe I should give Lord Varys a little visit before I do that. I mean, he must be awfully worried for his good friend's health, right? Only fair that I tell him I'm perfectly fine by the grace of the World Tree. I muttered to myself. Even I didn't know the kind of venom that was dripping from my face. The only problem is that even after over a month of staying in this castle, I barely knew the place. Wasn't the best with large places like this, especially remembering my way around. Finding Varys' quarters here would be significantly problematic. Sighing, I got ready to move. Though this might be an empty hall, the same can't be said for the entire Red Keep. There were definitely going to be patrols around that I'd run into. I don't think this time around the guards will give me those respectful nods like after I won the tournament. If not for Ned Stark being an absolute idiot, I still wouldn't have afforded this luxury for long. Sooner or later, Baelish's absence would be noticed, and they would have connected the dots. Granted, that could have taken a long time, but the spider broke the deal. So he has all the reasons to put the blame on me. I was never some sort of genius planner or anything. Should have known this would happen sooner or later. Shaking my head, I started moving. Had to find my way around this place somehow. It's not just Varys I needed to find, but also Ned Stark. The only reason I even asked Varys about Stark's location was cause I lacked any direction in this labyrinth of a castle. Ridiculously easy to lose yourself in its design, and exceedingly difficult to find one's destination. And it turns out sneaking around wasn't Thor's forte. Almost got caught the moment I got out of the room, and many more times after. The only thing stopping these guards from spotting me was the shade of night and my Asgardian senses, which could spot the guards even in the dark and from long distances. After 30 or so minutes of futile attempts, saying I was kind of lost wouldn't be wrong. I wasn't. I knew that. I still knew how to get out of the castle. What I failed to locate was Varys' quarters. Soon, I arrived in front of an expensive-looking door. No doubt this was an important person's room. Most likely the kings or queens. Probably their children. A dangerous place to be. If someone found me here, then calling me out as an assassin wouldn't be far-fetched. Quietly, I just wished to leave the darn place when I heard a peculiar noise from inside. Part of me just wished to get out of here, but my more logical side told me to at least hear what this was. I've seen far too many cliches in movies to avoid this kind of situation where I could miraculously get some heaven-defying secret. What the? I snapped my ear away from the gate and pursed my lips. There, right there. Harder. Okay. No heaven-defying secret, but still something I wished I didn't want to see, and yet couldn't help myself. Thor's body reacted much stronger to these urges. The door wasn't completely closed, so maybe a little peek. For academic reasons, of course. But then, surprisingly, I stopped myself. Whether it was me or Thor, we weren't some peeping Tom. I would either just let the lady have her fill, and Thor would graciously join her to help out. But not a peeping Tom. That's not something I'd do. Thor, the fuck. Just when I convinced myself to get going, I heard this, making me go stiff. For a second, I thought I was found out, but the continuous moaning from behind the door proved that wasn't the case. That voice, I saw the gate wasn't completely closed, and gulped. Since this is somewhat related to me, then maybe I should check it out. Never felt this conflicted before. One part of me was kind of hesitant to go in, and the other wished to just ram in with my cock out. I'm confident that the latter was the Thor part in me talking. Ultimately, I decided to just get a quick look. Slowly sneaking inside, making sure not to make any noise, I saw a woman. Naked. Playing with herself in the most obscene way possible. Doing wonders to my blood, which decided to redirect itself from my head to somewhere else. And if the visual feast wasn't enough, then the moans just drove me crazy. I hadn't masturbated ever since I came here, and in Thor's case, not having a woman to share my bed in 4 months was unheard of. Gulping, I restrained myself and at least bothered to see who this woman was. And not just stare at her long, beautiful legs, and what was between them, of course. And when I saw her face, still calling out my name while pleasuring herself, I stiffened. A chilling feeling spread through my spine when the face of the woman was revealed. Cersei, Chapter 49. Confusing ordeals. The queen was beautiful, there was no doubt about that, probably one of the most beautiful women in the entire Seven Kingdoms. Maybe only the likes of the Flower of Highgarden and the Mother of Dragons could compete with someone like her. She competed with them while being significantly older, in an era where makeup didn't exist. Yes, she could make any man hard with her allure, if only the said man didn't know her reality, that is. I though knew, and felt nothing but dread building up when I heard her calling out my name. Gulping, I slowly took a few steps back and backed off. If getting out of this darn city was important before, then now it had become a necessity. I'm not afraid of her or what she could do. I hardly believe she or anything her father has could hurt me, but I looked down near my pants and saw a bulge. Sighing, I pursed my lips and suppressed the overwhelming urge to just take the woman for myself. I did that because even gods know, don't put your dick in crazy. Getting out of there, although with dejection and a promise to myself to get myself a woman after I'm out of this city. Thor might have experience with hundreds of women over his thousands of years of lifespan, but those are nothing but memories for me. I, on the other hand, was still a virgin. Once again the hunt to find Varys' chamber started, which lasted until the sky started to light up slightly. Dawn was about to break, and this wasn't good. Even after hours of searching, I couldn't find Varys. I did find his chamber, but the spider wasn't there. Lucky man, but now the question arises that if he wasn't here, then where could he be? Could it be that what happened in the underground passages wasn't exactly his doing, and the spider himself had been crushed in that collapse? Well, that would be a very naive way of thinking on my part. Even if the man had no part in what happened, I must put the blame on him. Only then will I be cautious enough to deal with him next time. However, another question arose inside me, do I really need him in the first place? I get it, I promised myself not to go around killing people without good reason or before they target me. However, this was, after all, Spider we're talking about. If there are a few people who I would like to get rid of in this world, then his name would definitely be up there alongside Baelish. That man is no worse than Baelish in many regards. Maybe taking him out from the game would be wise. I muttered, still kind of baffled how even my talking style changes when I open my mouth. Thor's influence, of course. Sighing, I just shook my head. I didn't have the luxury to ponder over this question any longer. Dawn had broken, and today comes the judgment of one Lord Honorable Fool Stark. Odin knows I just wish the man to die and be out of this irksome ordeal. However, the man doesn't deserve to die. He so far has been kind to me in most regards, putting so much faith in a stranger. Sigh, honor really is an irksome thing. Follow it and one must face grave ordeals. If you so choose to ignore it, then only regret and guilt follow for only those who had honor once in them. I too find myself conflicted now. Saving Ned Stark from the dungeons would have been easy, but still miles better than intruding in an execution. Can I do without Stark? That was the first question in my mind. After all, the root of why I even came here was that. Not only will I be losing an upgrade point from Wolf Companion Quest, but I might even have trouble completing the main quest, Winter is Coming. That's 2 bloody upgrade points alone. 3 with both quests combined. Not to mention the war that comes after Ned Stark's death. Uniting the North against the White Walkers shouldn't be that hard after those lords see the living, or to be exact, dead, proof of the enemy which they would eventually face. No, the real trouble will come in the War of the Five Kings. Robb Stark was one of the kings, and here too the same fate might follow if anything were to happen to either his sisters or father. Perhaps I should have let him go to the throne room because of his stupid honor, but how was I to stop a Lord Paramount from acting anyway? Of course, I would knock him out, and let's say I don't hold back and take care of his 100 northern guards as well. Take the girls and escape the Red Keep. Even if I were to take that stubborn Northman to Winterfell on my back, he would have just ridden back to the south with his honor still intact. Ah! A low growl escaped my mouth. Thor was good for fighting but not for this political thinking and planning. My last life didn't prepare me for situations like this either. For Asgard's sake, get a grip. There is no way to change the past, and the future is unknown, meaning it could be shaped. I only know I wished to go back to a better era, and I'll do whatever it takes to achieve that goal, even if it means fighting off the entirety of Westeros. For goodness sake, I said to myself, finally finalizing my mind over one particular concrete goal. Taking a deep breath, I started to move. Time to get out of the castle. As for Ned Stark, he'll live. He still owes me a punch to the face. I gave him my word. If for nothing else, I have my reputation to keep. Syrio should be far enough that even if someone sent men after him and the girls, they wouldn't be able to catch them. Though for how long is the real question. I must hurry and escape the city with Stark. Reuniting with the girls takes precedence over everything else. Chapter 50. Unexpected Rescue. North, the cold wind howled through the dark trees as Bran and Sandor crouched behind a thick patch of snow-covered brush. They had been hiding for time more than enough to freeze their blood by now, and yet they couldn't move because ever since they escaped Castle Black, the men from the Night's Watch were looking for them, and they had to stay hidden. And they were everywhere, searching for them in every bush and every pile of snow which mildly looked high enough to cover a human. Without food, water, and most importantly warm shelter, they were at the edge of breaking down. Bran sat close to Sandor, wrapped in a heavy cloak, trying not to shiver. Even with his powers growing the closer he went north, he found that they didn't come with cold resistance. Definitely would have been a nice addition to all this new skin-changing powers he found he had and utterly lacked any control to use when the situation really counts, and the cold bit through his clothes like sharp knives. Hound was no different in this regard, though better than Bran, still he was no Northman. Born in the rocky lands of Westerly Hills and spent the better half of his life there before moving to King's Landing, this bone-chilling cold was just as hard on him as on anyone else. However, he still had to look out for those men in black searching for them. Ever since they left, those men were on their tails like hungry hyenas. Especially after Robb Stark visited the Wall. Sandor saw men with Winterfell emblems among those who wielded black. "We can't go back," Bran said softly. Maybe because he saw the Hound looking more and more grim lately. He couldn't say whether this was due to their currently chilly situation while on the run or it was whatever he saw back in Castle Black and refused to talk about. Sandor grunted. "Didn't plan on it. The first thing your brother does when he catches me is to cut my dick off and feed it to his dire wolf. No, I'm pretty sure Mother would kill him if he doesn't present you to her to torture and kill in one piece, and we don't have dire wolves." Hound grunted again, not willing to reply to this. He had enough to think about to wonder what kind of death the Lady Stark had planned for him. They both knew the truth. Crossing the wall through Castle Black was no longer an option. The Watch was watching every path, and if they were caught, it would be over. "We go northeast," Sandor said finally. "There's a river that runs through the Shadow Tower lands. Besides some other narrow passages around the wall, that is our only option to cross the wall." Bran nodded, wondering how the Hound even knew this all for a southerner but tactfully kept his mouth shut. He wasn't the only one who was out of his wits due to all the snow and cold. He'd rather not provoke the man who can kill him and bury him 6 feet under snow and no one would be wiser. He didn't know much about rivers or secret paths, but he trusted Sandor to some degree, maybe only because he had a faint feeling that Sandor too now believed in the three-eyed raven. The Hound might be rough and angry most of the time, but he had saved his life more than once as well, so that also counted. At least he's not an outright bad man who kills for enjoyment. Over the next few days, they traveled through the thick woods, careful to avoid open roads or signs of people. Heating snow for water and hunting whatever small animals they could get their hands on. They moved mostly at night and rested during the day. It was slow and cold, but they had no other choice. Bran tried to use his warg powers to scout ahead, slipping into the mind of a raven or a wolf when he could. He was getting better at it, though it still made him feel tired afterward. That was also how they were escaping the men in black. So, just like usual, he was back to his daydreaming, possessing one of the birds and looking over the sky to spot anything or anyone. And that's when Bran's eyes snapped open, his breath coming out in sharp gasps. He had just returned from the mind of a nearby bird, and what he saw made his heart pound. Sandor, Bran said quickly, shaking the big man's arm. They're coming. Men from the Night's Watch. They're close. Too close. Sandor didn't waste a second. He stood up fast and grabbed Bran's hand. Damn it. Come on. They took off through the snow-covered woods, their feet crunching over ice and twigs. Bran's cloak flapped behind him, and Sandor's heavy boots left deep tracks in the snow. The cold air bit at their faces, but neither of them cared. All that mattered was getting away. They'll see our tracks, Bran said, panting. Oh, really? Otherwise I thought they are running in knee-thick snow 'cause they couldn't find a cozy place to piss, Sandor growled. He looked back. Fuck. After running until their legs ached and lungs burned, they found a hollow beneath a thick, fallen tree. It was small, but just enough to squeeze into and hide. They huddled together, Bran trying to calm his breathing, Sandor keeping a hand on his sword. You had one job, just the one, Sandor whispered, though the sound looked like he yelled without yelling. I can scout so far in this forest. Hush, quiet now. The sound of footsteps and voices came closer. The men from the watch were searching the area, calling to each other, following the tracks in the snow. Bran held his breath. Sandor didn't move an inch. Then, just when it seemed the men would find them, everything changed. A deep, low growl rolled through the trees. Then, from the shadows, a huge shape moved between their hiding spot and the searching men. A giant direwolf. Its fur was as white as snow, its eyes glowing gold in the dim light. The men froze. One of them cursed under his breath. Another backed away slowly. Direwolf, one of them said shakily. Though they were in the north as much as north could be, and yet it's not always that they saw a direwolf this big. It was big enough to eat all of them and still had enough space in its belly to go after the two they were after. They turned back, quickly retreating the way they had come. The dire wolf stood there a moment longer, watching them leave. Then it turned its head toward Bran. Bran's eyes widened. That's, Sandor cursed under his breath. Gripping his sword tightly, he gulped. And the boy says they don't have direwolves, Hound cursed under his breath again. Can't you talk to him? He turned to Bran, with irritation on his face. Talking. I might, though I hardly believe he'll listen. Bran gulped, seeing the giant direwolf coming at them. As for talking, he can't, he was just too used to replying with sarcasm by this point. He might if you ask nicely. And that's when suddenly both heard this voice, making both of them stiffen. Stop, boy, we need them conscious. Again the voice came, and this time the man who said it revealed his face. Not exactly a man though, he was a boy too, older than Bran, but that didn't amaze both Bran and Sandor as much as how he stopped the wolf in its tracks by a single wave of his hand. Come on, we have a lot to talk about. Bran Stark. Chapter 51. Execution Day. King's Landing. The sky over King's Landing was gray, and the wind carried a certain chill today as the sun hid behind the thick clouds. As the crowd gathered in the square outside the great Sept, it was the day of Lord Eddard Stark's judgment. Word had spread quickly. Everyone wanted to see the fate of the man who once stood as hand of the king. Considering that the populace of King's Landing doesn't often get much in terms of entertainment, this was becoming a pretty crowded event. Guards lined the square, keeping the people back. At the front stood a raised platform, and in the middle of it, Ned Stark was brought in chains. His hands were tied, and his face was pale due to lack of water, food, light, and even oxygen if the horror stories about the castle dungeons held any truth, but he was calm nonetheless. He looked around, searching the crowd, hoping to not see his daughters anywhere near King's Landing. A faint smile appeared on his face when he couldn't spot his daughters or the man he entrusted them with. Only the angry, curious faces of the people of King's Landing stared back at him. And if dying here like a traitor meant that his daughters could be saved, then he had no regrets before he met the stranger. Well, maybe that might be one little grievance he had. He'd rather be buried alongside his kin under the shadow of the old gods, not here, where a stranger in all name and religion would take him. He was brought out here to be judged and given the final sentence by none other than the bastard king himself, Joffrey Waters. He dressed in gold and red, a smug look on his young face. That incestuous queen stood close behind him, her face like someone had stolen her dildo right under her nose before she was about to show some self-love. It was surprisingly talented of her to make herself look ugly with that perfectly practiced scowl, even after those legendary Lannister genes made her one of the most desirable females in the Seven Kingdoms. She had already spoken to Joffrey, told him to spare Ned Stark. Not what she wished, but a necessary step to make sure the realm didn't immediately break out in war. They needed him alive. They no longer had Arya or Sansa. If they killed Eddard, the North would rise in rebellion. But Joffrey was not listening. Or more like the power was getting to his head, to the point that he wasn't listening to anyone. A knight stepped forward and called out loudly, "Lord Eddard Stark is charged with treason. He lied to the realm and spread false claims that King Joffrey Baratheon is not the true heir. He tried to steal the throne through lies and deceit." The crowd murmured, some booing, others whispering in confusion. Though many were there only to see a pompous lord who didn't even shit on their heads, considering themselves as gods over lowberths like them, to be knocked a few pegs down. Ned Stark remained quiet. He had already made his peace. For the sake of his daughters, wherever they were, he had confessed to crimes he had not committed. He had bent the knee. All to protect his family. Then the knight turned to Joffrey. "Your Grace, what is your judgment?" Cersei leaned in, whispering urgently to Joffrey. "Keep him alive. We need him." But Joffrey, with a cruel smile, stood tall and raised his hand. "My mother wishes to show mercy," he said loudly so all could hear. "But that is the heart of a soft woman. I am the king. Under my rule, I can't allow any treason. Treason must be punished." Cersei's eyes widened, and her lips pursed up with tenseness. "No. I command Ser Ilyn Payne to bring me his head," Joffrey declared. A gasp swept through the crowd. Cersei stepped forward, trying to stop him. She by no means feared a war. Her father would win pretty much any war by simply throwing gold at the problem. However, there would be much to pay for her if she depended on him. A very long and nasty lecture about letting a war break out would be one of them. But it was too late. The guards held her back. I saw all this while being bent in among the countless numbers of watchers looking for a good medieval-style execution. I wouldn't lie that I too wouldn't mind seeing some heads roll. Not so much on pikes though, that's just creepy. Do Asgardians do beheadings? I suddenly got curious and started searching through Thor's memories. Strange how it works when it comes to two different sets of memories. My older one is just fine. A mere 17 years worth of memories with nothing. No matter how many embarrassing situations I had experienced over a small relatively short lifespan, compared to Thor's enormous lifespan doing nothing but hacking, smashing, drinking, and fucking. I would have long gone mad with all those memories running rampantly inside my head if I went through all of them bit by bit. In fact, the actual useful information from Thor's memories wasn't that much. Like, I would love to know how those power runes work to supercharge my godly powers and get the fuck out of this place without playing to this darn system's quest, but Thor remembered little to none of those useful bits. Sigh. Whatever. Shaking those thoughts out of my mind, I shifted my eyes back to the execution. I was just glad that my very basic disguise, which was a thin cloth over my blonde locks and exploded arm muscles, helped me enough to avoid attracting any unwanted attention. Though that was about to change pretty soon. Ned Stark looked up, his eyes finding the sky. He did not beg. He did not cry. He was a Stark of Winterfell, and he would die with honor. Ser Ilyn Payne drew his greatsword and stepped forward, and this was the time when I had to decide whether to save the honorable fool and save myself a shitload of trouble but keep on doing the babysitting, or let him die and let the hell break loose. Though I might have short-term satisfaction of seeing important people die. After thinking much, my need of punching the man in person won over seeing him lose his life. So the question was how, when the entire city with almost all the armor-clad knights were here. Stats. Godly Body LVL 1 Mjolnir LVL 2 Thunder LVL 1 Available upgrade points 3 Ongoing quests Wolf's Companion Winter's Coming Kill the Night King. 3 upgrade points Well, it's about time these mortals learn that there is another god in Westeros worth enough to be made into another religion. Did I just call myself a god? Sigh. Let's just get this over with. Chapter 52. Hammer and the lightning. Just as the executioner raised his sword high above Ned Stark's neck, a sudden blur shot through the air. Suddenly the lightning crackled up in the sky, reminding everyone that this wasn't the best of days to hold a public execution. Crack. Another sound came, but this time around this wasn't the thunder crackling up in the sky. It was something else entirely. A heavy force slammed into Sir Ilan Payne, throwing him back like a ragdoll. It was so fast that it was a blur until it hit him and it came out of nowhere. He crashed to the ground, completely unconscious with a single hit. The crowd gasped in shock, still figuring out what happened. Their confusion was a shared trait in pretty much everyone present, everyone staring at the strange object that had struck him. They were staring because that said object didn't fall. Instead, the object floated, hovering above the ground. It spun slowly in place, catching the light, shimmering with the perfectly timed lightning which took place. People stared in awe. It was a hammer. A large, powerful-looking and highly impractical hammer, unlike anything they had seen before. Or did they? Because few seemed to have recognized the said hammer if their searching eyes were anything to go by. Then, without warning, the hammer pulled away, flying backward through the air. It cut across the air like a streak of light, heading straight toward the platform's edge. There stood a tall, broad-shouldered man with golden hair and stormy blue eyes. He reached out calmly, and caught the hammer in one hand. A hush fell over the crowd. Even Joffrey took a step back, stunned or afraid. No one could have said. My father used to say, a wise king never seeks out war, but he must always be ready for it. You certainly disappoint in that first regard if trying to behead a Lord Paramount is any indication. So, let's see whether you're ready for the war you're seeking, said the man, and then he lifted the hammer up in the air. The air grew heavy. The sky darkened even further as clouds swirled above the square. Everyone stared at the man, stunned by what they had just seen. Then, suddenly, boom! A bolt of lightning cracked down from the sky, striking the hammer with a roar that shook the ground. People screamed and stumbled back, shielding their eyes. The light was blinding, the thunder deafening. From the heart of the lightning, he stood tall, still holding up his hammer in the air. He stood there like nothing happened, like the bolt of lightning never hit and it was nothing but an imagination of the people around him. By the time the lightning was gone, he was wearing the shining armor of a god. The same armor he wore during the tourney, only now it glowed with power. His chestplate sparkled like steel forged by the stars, and his red cloak whipped behind him as the wind howled through the square. Some who knew this figure were left wide-mouthed. Eyes glowed with stormlight, and Mjolnir hummed with power in his grip. Ned Stark, who saw this, was gaping by this point. He knew the man. Beside the fact that he wasn't supposed to be here, Ned was wondering what just happened. He knew that the man had his secrets. He was way too powerful or good or handsome or many more things he cared to agree to think the man was not someone important. So yeah, he knew the man had secrets, but what kind of secrets would let the man bring down lightning from the heavens themselves? Cersei on the side was wide-mouthed. A very complicated expression was plastered on her face. Her mouth was open and gone was the condescending look she often had. Joffrey, for all that it's worth, was the same if not worse. And to all this, I just stood there with power coursing through my body. Godly body at LVL2, thunder at LVL2 and Mjolnir at LVL3. Who would have thought that with just this much I would feel like Thanos adding the last Infinity Stone onto his gauntlet? For some reason, a smile broke out on my face. Part of the reason could be because I kind of enjoy all those gobsmacked looks I was getting, but that was just a very small part of it. The main reason would definitely be the power I was feeling right now. I feel like I could destroy the entire castle with just one punch. Like I could stop a train in its tracks. Part of my mind, which still held a semblance of logical thinking, spoke out that it was just me imagining things. Yeah, I was strong and Thor at his peak could definitely do those things, albeit with a slight trouble on his part. However, I was still lacking. Or at least that's what I think. So to figure out the new limits of this body, I rotated the hammer around my grip before clenching it with an ironclad grip. Come on, at least make it a challenge for me, I said and rushed forward. But apparently, others still hadn't come out of their daze until I rushed toward the closest knight near me and swung the hammer in my hand with all the force I could muster with a single hand. And the outcome of the action was glorious if I have seen any. The knight with pretty hefty armor went flying back, raised 5 or so meters high from the ground, only to be slammed to the ground with a loud thud. The armor was shattered to the point that the fall completely broke it and blood poured out from all the corners upon his fall. The man was dead, there was no doubt about it. Then the chaos began. Screams began. Shouting began. Seize him. Joffrey screamed from the throne, pointing at me with a shaking hand. Kill him. Now. The Kingsguard hesitated to act, I could feel it the way they were looking at me. But after some motivational threats from Joffrey, they had to rush forward, swords drawn. Lannister soldiers joined them though unwillingly, surrounding the platform. Good, because I had a feeling I'll be needing some more punching bags if I wished to see the limit of my current level. However, before anything I had to reach the Stark. Or if they threatened me with his life, then things could go bad really quickly. With all my speed I sped up towards Stark, who was still gawking at me, if him forgetting to blink or close his mouth was any indication. Raising Mjolnir I slammed it down directly at the chain binding him, restricting his movements. Freeing him, and I just happened to be carrying another sword which I just happened to get my hands on while I was inside the castle. I tossed him a very familiar looking greatsword, making him finally come out of his daze, and even though I knew he had as many questions as there are stars in the night sky, he still composed himself and got up with the sword, although with a little difficulty. Maybe the dungeons didn't serve him well. The only thing he asked was, "Where are my daughters?" "They are safe." That was the only bit he was gonna get from me before I get that punch I promised him. "Focus on getting out of here. I'll hold them back and come after you. Go," I said, and then lightly shoved him towards the crowd, asking him to just blend in while I distract others and get the hell out of here. He by all means looked like he wanted to argue, but another thunder crackle shut him up. Maybe he remembered what just happened a few minutes ago and he nodded. With that out of the way, I roared, something which I learned from Thor's memories, and charged towards the knights lined up. Chapter 53. Hold my thunder. The moment I saw Stark moving, I knew it was time to make my ancestors proud, if that makes any sense. For Asgard. With a shout, I charged forward. Mjolnir in hand, I smashed the first row of knights, sending bodies flying like broken dolls. I spun, letting the hammer tear through shields and armor. Sparks flew with every blow. They tried to surround me. However, I had learned my lesson from the last time about getting surrounded by enemies. Mjolnir had already started to rotate in my hands like a propeller, so fast that it began to disturb the wind around me before I swung the rotating mass of godly metal around at anyone daring to come near me. Many were just blown away by the sheer power of the strike, while a few died on the spot when the extremely fast rotating hammer hit something vital. It was clear that coming close to me was sheer death with how easily I was able to handle multiple knights effortlessly. An archer loosed an arrow from a balcony. I barely caught sight of him before I dodged the upcoming arrow. Though I doubted those arrows could penetrate Thor's armor, dodge I must, if for nothing else than for the sake of learning proper fighting movements and actions and ingraining them in my head. I didn't give him another chance to notch his bow though. With power and anger boiling in my body, I tossed Mjolnir at him, sending the hammer flying straight at the man, who didn't see the meteor-like object coming before he was completely knocked out. Or in fact killed, if Mjolnir hitting his head directly was any indication. More guards came, shouting for reinforcements. Gold cloaks, Lannister knights, even a few Kingsguard. I didn't care who they were. They stood in my way. I once again raised my hand, and like a lover, I found the hammer getting attracted to me. It tore through all the lineup of knights and obstacles to return to my hand. A knight tried to flank me. I grabbed him by the breastplate and threw him into a wall. Another came from behind. I turned and hit him with Mjolnir so hard his armor bent inwards like tin. More and more soldiers surrounded me, and now hitting them one by one was difficult. That was the problem with fighting multiple enemies at the same time. No matter how mighty, numbers hold a might of their own. However, I wished to test out just a move with Mjolnir in this particular situation. I once again rotated the hammer with the leather straps at the end of its handle before releasing it, making the hammer fly around me in an orbit, hitting any and all who came near me. Making a barrier to stop the enemies from inching closer while I tested out the newfound physical strength I got with Godly Body at LVL2. Any enemies who got past the circling Mjolnir I hit hard with strong punches and kicks. Found that I needed no hammer to bend armor if I so desired. Though it was still not as effective. Through the chaos, I saw Ned reach the alley. He turned back to look at me. I nodded. He was close enough to the exit now, meaning I should too finish this battle at the earliest. Another wave of knights came rushing at me. Never knew the soldiers of King's Landing were so diligent at their work. How come they don't act like this when women are getting raped? When children are getting killed? Perhaps because half the time it was their own men doing the said horrid actions, or perhaps this time was an oddity because a certain wannabe king was hurling insults and threats at them to bring my head. Whatever the case, there were more knights this time around, not only just knights but even normal soldiers pointing their swords and spears at me. I saw multiple other archers gunning for me, and I knew that fighting all of them one-on-one would be difficult. I wasn't here to kill them per se, I was here to distract, giving Stark enough time to get out of the city. So, I raised Mjolnir to the sky again and focused. Even after upgrading both Mjolnir and Thunder abilities, I couldn't just control lightning like it was a single button push action. I had to concentrate. Yet, I didn't mind at all, because the fruit of that extreme focus was a glorious strike of lightning which traversed hundreds of meters to come to me. Thunder answered my call. A deep rumble shook the ground beneath our feet. Clouds rolled in above the city, dark and thick. The first bolt struck down a tower far behind the crowd. The second came crashing down upon my hammer, and the world lit up with white fire. The lightning surged through me, and I let it, until I directed all that power towards the lines of iron-wearing fools on a stormy day. For all Father. Ha! This was the first time I tried to channel lightning like this, like a weapon, and it was harder than I first anticipated it to be. Easy enough to channel, but hard to hit the target with the bolt of lightning which was quick to rush at anything barely conductive in its way. Good for me that anything conductive in front of me at this time was either an enemy or something the said enemy was holding. A dazzling bolt of sheer power, a bolt of thunder tore through the enemy lines, burning them alive and scorching wherever it went. I saw an entire section of knights fall to the ground. Silent was their death and louder was the silence which followed after that. People looking at this with fear while remembering their gods to show mercy. Little the ignorant mortals knew that their seven had no stakes in this fight or my ordeals. The silence was indeed much louder in terms of expressing the situation. Barely holding one breath, those who still lied shaking in their positions while all eyes were fixed on me. If the earlier calling of lightning and a flying hammer was enough to threaten the local populace of King's Landing, then the wide-scale massacre in front of them now was enough to dull their senses. Make fear strike them so hard that they forget to run for their lives. Though they really didn't have to, for I never wished any harm on the innocent. I also caught from the corner of my eyes that one knight was trying to take Joffrey and the queen away until I tore through the enemy lines with lightning. Everyone stopped where they were, part fear and part shock keeping their mind from giving another instruction to their bodies and rooting their foot down to the earth. Who knows, maybe the next bolt of lightning could come for them. I huffed, channeling lightning with still this low level kind of left me exhausted. Though maybe it was because this was my first time doing so. I steadied my voice and then said it out loud. Toss your weapons away, yield and you have my word that no one further shall be harmed, I shouted while looking at the shaken line of knights in front of me. Chapter 54. Worth of a god's word. Cersei stood frozen, her breath caught in her throat. At one point she was fussing over her son's foolish actions and the next she found the sky falling on them. One moment, the executioner was raising his blade to end Eddard Stark's life. The next, something shot through the air with blinding speed and slammed into him, knocking him unconscious. It was no arrow, no spear, nothing could send a man flying like that and put him unconscious. There are many things which can kill a fully armored knight like that, but nothing which can make him fly like that. But if that wasn't it, whatever that object was, it didn't fall down. Rather it stopped mid-air, clearly flying. And once her eyes finally focused after the lightning flashes, she noticed a very recognizable hammer. Thor's hammer. Before anyone could react, the hammer flew back and a man caught it, and as soon as he did, the skies darkened. Clouds rolled in with unnatural speed. Then came the lightning, crashing down upon the man, a blonde man who she found herself always thinking about, her knights going by nowadays calling his name in loneliness. He was Thor, and when he came out of the lightning strike, it was like the gods themselves had summoned him. Thunder roared across the square, shaking the ground. And there he stood, with the same marvelous red cloak fluttering behind him while the armor shone in the thunder with brilliant shimmer. Lightning came down and engulfed him, hitting directly at the hammer. It was like he was commanding the lightning itself. But it can't be, no one can do that. Not even the mages of old. Valyria could do something like that. Cersei couldn't move. Couldn't speak. All she could do was watch. Her body refused to move when that lightning came down, striking Thor, and then he came out of it completely unharmed, with armor on. But that wasn't the end of it, far from it. What Cersei saw after that made her shudder. Thor charged. With a single swing, he sent men flying. Guards crumpled before him. Steel shattered. Shields splintered. He took down waves of enemies like they were toddlers, like they were made of wax. He raised Mjolnir and called down more lightning. Blinding bolts crashed from the heavens, tearing through stone and armor. If the first time was a stroke of sheer luck, a magic to enmesh their senses, or maybe she was the only one seeing this, maybe she was intoxicated, but then the next time when he called down lightning, it was clear that it wasn't just her seeing things. This was no trick. She could smell the burning flesh, she could feel the electricity in the air. But more than anything, she could feel the fear around her. She knew that he was no ordinary man, there was no way otherwise she would be taken so much by him. There was that mark on his back, the mystery regarding her firstborn still up in the air. She knew that going against him was wrong, her instincts told her not to, and yet, what he was still a question in her mind, but it was clear that he was capable of things no man could, and winning against him, against something who can wield lightning himself, whose armor doesn't even scratch in a fight, who can kill a man barehanded with just a punch. No. And then her eyes tore through that handsome face and went back to her child. A sudden panic settled in her when she realized what this means. What will happen to Joffrey? Could anyone stop Thor if he wished to kill Joffrey? Millions of things started to run through her mind, fear and anxiety bulging inside her. Even now she thought that whatever she was looking at was nothing but the outcome of her being intoxicated by a substance she knew not of. Joffrey, on the other hand, was muttering something incomprehensible to himself. However, the fear he held in those eyes was visible to everyone. Toss your weapons away, yield, and you have my word that no one further shall be harmed. I said this, waiting more like hoping for them to heed my words. Odin knows I could kill anyone here and no one would be wiser until they saw it happen themselves or lived to tell the tale. However, I didn't wish to kill. For that remained the same between us, neither Thor nor I wished to kill the innocents. Can't say about MCU Thor or any other version of him for that regard, but the memories I have of him, he wasn't at least a mass murderer or someone who enjoyed killing. So I waited, hoping they would heed my words. Not like I couldn't bolt out of here, since Stark would most likely be out of the city by now. But even that would take some lives to pass those gates. And then there are also those who I have enough leverage to get rid of to negate any future complications. My mind telling me to get rid of Cersei, get rid of Joffrey, and more than anything smash that spider's face to the ground. And just when my mind was reeling through all these thoughts, I heard the sound I was waiting for, a metal dropping to the ground sound. A weapon dropping to the ground sound. One by one, from swords to spears, all of them fell to the ground. The city guards, after hearing my warning, decided to give up. Strange how things went with mortal hearts. Against an army they would stand still, yet they fear someone who can command lightning, while the result of both would inevitably end with their death. However, this was exactly what I wished for. So, a wise move. Heed my word, there is no disgrace in dropping your weapon in times when one's heart wavers to recognize right from wrong. It's time to question one's morale and be the man you once wished others could have been to you. As you have my word. None shall be harmed, I said, especially the last part, while looking at Cersei, who was still looking at me like I was a stranger reincarnated. I know I should take care of them right here and right now, even the 17-year-old me would have done that. However, surprisingly, it was the Thor in me who conflicted from taking any action. Strange as the world is, it was Thor's honor and his value to his tongue which made me hesitate. I obviously gave my word to Robert I wouldn't act against Joffrey. Now I feel that maybe I should be more cautious about whom I promise what. At the time I couldn't care less, but when I have to respect those words, I can feel it, my mind and soul start to tear itself. Like an internal conflict about what should have been done and what I should do. I have no right to call Ned Stark a fool if I act like him, but again this wasn't exactly honor which stopped me, it was more like pride. Thor's pride to stand up to his words. To not act against a defenseless woman even after knowing the said woman was a bloodthirsty lioness. I still gripped my hammer harder, to move and just throw the hammer at Cersei's or Joffrey's head even after I was conflicted. Even after my entire being was telling me not to. However, just as I was about to do that, a burning sensation appeared at my back. An intense pain tore through my body. I could feel it. It originated exactly where I had that mark on my back. Something's not right here. This can't be just me hesitating. What is this pain and this uncomfortable feeling like it's getting harder to breathe? And then I felt something which almost trembled my heart. I felt the hammer in my hand getting heavier. The Asgardian rune of worthiness emerged from it, making my breath hitch. You gave your word. That is the word of the future king of Asgard. My ear rang, a heavy voice rang in my ears, almost taking me by surprise. A tingling sensation passed through my back. A chill crept up my spine. Gulping, I took one step back by instinct, and as soon as I did that, I felt the heavy oppressive feeling disappear. The hammer in my hand went light as a feather and my breathing came back to order. By Allfather, what was that? Chapter 55. Do words hold power? Cersei stood frozen in place, her heart racing as chaos unfolded before her eyes. Thor stood tall in the center, his red cloak fluttering in the wind, Mjolnir crackling with leftover lightning in his grip. He brought forth the lightning from the sky and burned half of the city guards alive. By the seven, this was the first time she saw something like this, and her heart was almost ready to beat out of her chest. No one dared move. The guards left standing had dropped their weapons. Fear had gripped their hearts. Thor didn't move after that, but even his gaze was making their backs crawl and tense up. Then, he spoke. His voice rang loud and clear over the silence. Lay down your weapons, he said, and you have my word that no harm will come to anyone here. Some guards dropped their swords immediately. Others hesitated only a moment before following. No one wanted to face the wrath of a man who could summon the sky itself. Cersei watched him scan the crowd, like he was looking for someone. While defended by guards, both she and Joffrey were still easily visible for him to notice, and thus he was looking for someone else. But who? However, her breath caught as his eyes landed on Joffrey after he seemed not to find whoever he was looking for. For a moment, she feared he might strike. Her body tensed. This fear was far greater than when she saw thunder strike from the sky when he burned those city guards alive. She was ready to scream, do anything to save her boy. But Thor didn't move toward her son. Instead, he turned his gaze to her suddenly. His stare was cold. Piercing. Like a predator eyeing its prey. For a heartbeat, Cersei felt as if her life hung by a thread. She stiffened. She was sure that he would bring down thunder on her head anytime. His eyes told her so. However, that didn't happen either. In fact, without a word, he turned away. Thor began to walk toward the gates, leaving behind stunned silence and a city too afraid to stop him. Cersei could only stand there, her heart pounding in her chest, shaken and confused. Half disbelieving what just happened and half numb to her own breathing, to the fact that she lived. She saw him go away, just like that, without any demands, no more bloodshed, no words. Little did she know that words have power. Can't blame her though, I learned about it today myself. She, in fact, should be grateful that those words I said in my ignorance saved them. They saved her and her bastard son. Remembering the feeling of that utter pressure around me when I even so much as thought about acting against anyone in King's Landing after I gave my word to not harm them was terrible. As I got out of the gutter of a city, I was only pondering how foolish I was to not see the signs which were in front of me. From the personality change to the way I feel conflicted every time I try to contradict Thor's personality, it should have been obvious. However, this was the first time I firsthand saw Thor's personality completely overpower mine. Why now though? There has to be a reason behind why it suddenly acted like that. You gave your word. Those words still ring in my ears like telling me the reason why this happened now. Word. Does my word really mean that much? Was it just Thor's personality which lashed out when his honor and pride were at stake? If so, then can he even make me unworthy? Or was it something else? Could it be that Mjolnir started to reject me the moment I planned to attack anyone there, because I was going back on my word? First, I wished to go after Joffrey of all people, and I felt that uncomfortable feeling so I unconsciously changed my target to Cersei, even going as far as readying myself to throw Mjolnir at her. And that's when I felt pressure building around me, while Mjolnir got heavier. While getting out of the city, I once again thought of attacking a city guard to test out my theory, and that feeling was back again. Not as intense, but it was back nonetheless. I won't go after him, you have my word. I told that to Robert before he died. Lay down your weapons and no harm shall come to any of you, you have my word. And that was what I said in the city to stop those soldiers. Thus, that means that I could go after them once I leave the city and this particular incident passes. At least that's what I meant when I said those words. Could it be that there is some sort of magical contract taking place when I give my word? It's not impossible seeing how Odin puts his runes with just words, or how Thor in the fourth movie was able to share his power through Zeus' lightning bolt by just incantation of words. Before I even knew it, I was out of the city with my hands clenched in frustration at the situation. If it were just my own actions which threatened to cause my unworthiness, then I could handle that. After all, I just gotta be a man of my word, follow those knightly virtues. However, if my earlier suspicions that it was Thor's own personality causing this are true, then I might have bigger trouble on my hands. I just hope that if it's indeed Thor, then it's MCU Thor post his first movie. At least he'll be easy to deal with. It was indeed frustrating, not only did I not find Varys, Odin knows where that eunuch has buried himself. I couldn't even take down either Joffrey or Cersei. Sigh. At least Stark got out of there. Something going in my favor. Tightening my grip around my hammer, I sped up. Gotta reach Stark and then catch up to the girls. Even though we didn't specify a meeting place, I knew that he would be near the stables, which indeed was the case. He had already secured a steed for himself. Thor, where are my daughters? Ned Stark had many questions the way he looked at me and asked. However, the only thing his heart wished to know was the safety of his daughters. Unfortunately for him though, he owed me a punch to his face. Worry not, Stark, you'll see them soon. As soon as he opened his mouth and asked this, I was upon him, already swinging my arm back, making a fist and trying my damnedest to hold back to not kill the fool. Crack, that sound definitely didn't arouse any motivation inside me, nor the way he fell back, completely knocked out. However, his still breathing form ensured that all that effort to save him wasn't for nothing. Though he might be out for a good while. And that's when I realized that maybe hitting him on his face once we met the girls and got further away from here would have been better. Now, I have to carry his body all the way to them. Sigh. At least by the time he wakes up, he'll indeed see his daughters, so I didn't lie there. Chapter 56. Small man big shadow Castle Rock. The great halls of Castle Rock echoed with the measured step of one Tyrion Lannister. A rather small man with big grievances with life. Torchlight flickered across the stone walls, casting long shadows behind the dwarf as he made his way to the solar, where his lord father awaited, or at least that would be the polite term to put it. In reality, he knew that man never waited for him, never considered him as his son, and even at times would not even acknowledge his existence if not to uphold the name of his family, his house, and his future glory. The so-called legacy behind which Tywin Lannister worked all his life, did unspeakable profanities and would do the same if reason arose which would so cause his house even a grain of shame or blood. Tywin Lannister sat behind a long oaken table, fingers steepled, gaze cold as the northern winds. He did not rise, nor offer a greeting. His eyes, sharp as daggers, followed Tyrion's approach with veiled contempt. You've returned, Tywin said, his voice devoid of warmth. North gals were a little too cold for my cock. I'm afraid I can't lose more in the size department as it is already, Tyrion replied, the corner of his mouth twitching with a smirk. Tywin, for his credit, didn't even bat an eye at this despicable talk. He kept on just glaring at his youngest with the same intensity which would be suitable for a lion ready to hunt prey. Your prodigal son, back from his travels and no feast, no gals from the whorehouses of Lee, not very befitting for our esteemed house and its glory, wouldn't you say? Tywin said nothing, just kept on glaring at his youngest like sizing him up. A show of power, building pressure, authority, and more than anything, his silent way to show that he doesn't care. Not about Tyrion's return or his escapades. I bring a letter, Tyrion finally sighed and said, knowing fully well that any more and he might be dismissed in a rather demeaning manner. He stopped. It wasn't good for his health angering his lord father especially when he knew what kind of news he brought. So he quietly reached within his cloak and retrieved a folded parchment sealed with the lion sigil of House Lannister. From Jaime. He sends his regards. And, oddly enough, an apology. Tywin wasn't expecting this. He thought this monster spawn was here to waste his time as usual. He showed the slightest of disdain before he reached out for the letter, broke the seal, and began to read. At first, his expression was unmoved. But as his eyes scanned the contents, his brow furrowed. Tyrion watched, enjoying the rare sight of his father's composure slipping. White Walkers, Tywin said, almost spat like he was mocking or looking down on thoughts of creatures biologically inferior to his. And yet this was his sons. Tyrion said, pouring himself a cup of wine uninvited. Dead men walking. Not the kind Cersei keeps in her bedchamber either. The real sort. Cold, silent, and more persuasive than Sept is in terms of changing our affiliations. Though this particular one might cost our lives. Small price to pay for crawling beyond the free world existing beyond the wall for eternity, if anyone asks me. Tywin looked up sharply. You seem quite taken with the proposition. Should have taken it. Or this walker wasn't interested in a man of your stature, Tywin replied, not even acknowledging what he read, like he knew it was full of cow dung. Tyrion smiled, a forceful one, but smile indeed he did. Not quite. In fact, the one I encountered didn't seem to distinguish a man or any form of life in that regard. As long as they are living, they were most pleased to take them. I, however, couldn't find it in me to leave behind the company of our dear little family. I have yet to burn half of the gold in Castle Rock on whores and wines, if that's even possible, and make my dear father proud. Again, Tywin didn't respond to this. He just turned back to the letter. And what about this, Thor? Yes, Tyrion said, sipping his wine. A man with the strength of 10 and a hammer he treats like lesser men treat their own cock, in his hand all the time. Though I assure you this was no lesser man. He, after all, was the one who caught the white. Tywin's jaw clenched. It was not like this was the first time he was hearing about Thor. News from King's Landing comes to Castle Rock much faster than anyone could imagine. Ravens have told this Hammer Lord's tales. Not more than a day passes and half of Westeros knows how he beat one of Tywin's strongest cards in the deck. The Mountain's defeat was like a slap on Tywin's reputation. He had two thoughts about taking action against Thor. However, the fight was done in a tourney and no foul play was involved. Even if he took his revenge against this man, he couldn't recover the loss of reputation which was lost in front of many lords and ladies of various houses. He could only remove a powerful pawn from the chessboard. Which he previously intended to do. However, this pawn was placed by a new player. One who hardly played the game and more importantly was in alliance with him by co-affiliation. Ned Stark, after all, was the hand of the king now. He can be moved, but moving against him would cost much, especially when Robert was still on the throne while the North gave support to his rule. The very same throne which his grandson would sit on soon. That, however, changes now since Robert was dead and Joffrey was king. Though he doubted he had to move himself, just a little push to his daughter should suffice to bring those northerners to pikes. He is considering Thor as a northerner here. And finally, Tyrion waited, and ultimately added, Jaime has gone beyond the wall. To seek out this threat himself. What? Tywin asked in a jolt, his eyes back on the letter, eyes moving miles a second before he slammed the parchment down. My son goes chasing fairy tales while my house stands on the edge of war. War. Tyrion narrowed his eyes. It seems in his absence much has happened in the realm which he's unaware of. Not knowing what was happening, he decided to crack another one of his annoying jokes to poke for information, in his own way. Well, I did hear one of the whores in the north plan to venture south, but to wage war over her cunt is enough. Tywin growled. You think your jests can shield you from consequences. I have lived through many consequences, as you can already see. They began the moment you decided to use your cock once more after making my dear siblings. However, I fail to see how me being born has anything to relate to this. You should have stopped him, Tywin growled, now really getting angry. Yes, Tyrion said, setting his cup down, his voice hardening slightly. I should have. In fact, I did. But did you really expect me to succeed? What is one more failure? Tywin stood, towering over Tyrion. I'll not be lectured in my own hall by the creature that killed his own mother. Tyrion's smile faded. And yet here I am, father. The only child who's still listening to you. They stood in silence, the fire crackling between them. At last, Tywin turned away. You are dismissed. Tyrion bowed with mock flourish. As always, a pleasure. And with that, he turned and walked away, leaving Tywin to stare at the letter, the flicker of unease now burning like a slow flame in his chest. Chapter 57. Reunited. The fire crackled low in the hearth of the crumbling cottage where Syrio had taken shelter with the two Stark girls. The storm that had raged over King's Landing had passed, leaving behind a damp stillness. Even from this far away they would have seen the massive storm brewing on top of King's Landing. If there ever was a list to leave that horrid city behind, then another very good reason had been added there today. They knew that they couldn't stay there for long. Maybe the storm would slow down the soldiers coming after them, but they would come eventually. However, the journey they had undertaken wasn't a short one. It would take them an entire moon, a month in Westerosi language, to reach their destination. So they had to rest and regain their strength before they moved on further. Syrio knew this, and thus he allowed them a little rest time before they eventually moved on. Sansa knelt upon a threadbare rug, her hands clasped tightly in prayer. Arya, meanwhile, paced like a caged direwolf, muttering and glaring at the shuttered windows. Seven above, hear me, Sansa whispered. Bring them back. Bring back my lord father and Thor. Let them live. Let them live. Seven won't listen to you. If they had to, then they would have a long time ago. And prayers won't bring them back, Arya snapped, her voice sharp with worry, though her eyes shimmered with unshed tears. I should have stayed. I could have helped. Syrio sat nearby, cleaning the edge of his blade. Everyone has their battle, Arya child. You will have your own someday, but this is not yours to take part in. If you had stayed, you would be dead or worse, held captive, which would have led to the death of your family, and the reason would have been you. The god of death has many hands, boy, but even he knows better than to raise them against those who have yet to come to adulthood. Arya gritted her teeth and turned away. She, of course, knew this. Thor had said pretty much the same things. However, she didn't wish to hear them now. She needed to know what was going on in King's Landing. What had happened to her father and Thor? Her mind drifted to the moment before the escape, when Thor took them away from their chambers and helped them escape the city. You take them far, to the Riverlands if you must, he had said, voice grim but calm. I will bring their father back and come after you. Just make sure to stay clear from the King's Road. Follow it but stay hidden. Arya had clutched his cloak. Let me fight. I can hold a blade now. I won't be a burden. Thor had knelt, putting his big hand on her head like she was some sort of animal, ruffling and mostly messing their already hard to handle messy hair. You're brave, little one, a little wolf if your father's saying about wolf's blood is anything to go by. But bravery alone wins no battles, Arya. I cannot save your father and look after you together. You're better needed here anyways. Protect your sister. That is your war, for now. Wakanda forever. She pursed her lips and repeated what Thor usually said to motivate himself once he started to get tired of his workout, to get a few more reps in. Ha ha. Even Heimdall would find it challenging to find another like you, child. Thor laughed and ruffled her head more, completely ruining her hair. Sansa had only nodded tearfully, unable to find words. Please, she whispered to him, bring my father back. Bring us back together. And Thor had laid a hand on her shoulder, gently. You have my word, my lady. If only Thor knew then that giving away his words like secondhand clothes wasn't quite healthy for him. That was 2 days ago, though. They had covered as much distance as they could while hiding from any patrol or guards they found. Keeping a low profile, Arya halted mid-step. But what if they don't see me coming? I can slip back, poke them like you taught me. No one will see me. Speak such madness again and I'll bind your feet, Syrio warned without looking up, halting Arya's speech midway. It's my fault, Sansa muttered under her breath. It's not, Sansa child. No, it is. It's because I asked mother to convince father to take the hand's position, only so that I could marry the prince and become queen. It's all my fault. Oh, he would have taken the position anyway. Don't beat yourself over it. Thor said it himself, Arya said, remembering what Thor said to her. Her way to comfort her sister, maybe. What if they are? Do not speak it, Arya hissed. He promised he'll come back. We just have to wait and keep moving. At first, they weren't quiet, devastated and afraid but quiet. But only recently, When there was no sign of Thor, their father, did they start to feel hopeless? They started to break down emotionally. The night was thick with fog and silence, yet no one found sleep. If later they could have, then those chances too got lost when the silence was broken only by a sound coming from a distance, coming towards them. Syrio's hand shot to his blade, and in a breath, he stood before the hearth, sword gleaming in the firelight. Behind me, he hissed low, eyes sharp as a cat's in the dark. Arya pulled Sansa close, her breath caught in her throat. They heard the rider before they saw him, a tall shadow upon a black steed, cloaked from head to spur. The horse neighed, stamping near the doorway, and the figure slid down with the quiet grace of a trained killer. The darkness didn't let them see much. The cloak didn't help in that regard either. Syrio raised his sword. Show thy face, shadow, lest I remove it myself. Thou shalt try me, friend, though victory in this ordeal you would find none. A deep voice came, making others tense. However, the voice sounded familiar. The figure said nothing after that, only pulled back his hood with one gloved hand. Firelight kissed golden hair and stormwrought eyes. Thor, Sansa breathed, the name breaking from her lips like a prayer answered. Arya didn't even bother saying anything. She just bolted like a flash, gone from behind Syrio before he could know it, barreling into Thor with such force even he staggered half a step. She threw her arms around him without shame. Thought you were dead, she muttered into his chest. Ha ha, I assure you many have tried and failed before, and so would in future. Seeing Arya like that, I just ruffled the little she-wolf's head. After making sure she was fine, I turned to the elder. Sansa followed slower, her steps hesitant but her eyes wide with unshed tears. When she reached him, she too threw her arms around him, but barely a moment passed before she realized what she'd done. She stepped back quickly, cheeks afire. I beg your pardon, my lord. No pardon needed, my lady. It warms the heart to know I was missed by a fair maiden such as you. Another reason not to die, don't you say, my friend? Grinning, I turned to Syrio. Syrio sheathed his sword, still watching the trees. You have the timing of a cat in a winehouse, but yes, it makes all the difference. Syrio grinned back. Where is father? Arya was the first one to ask, and immediately Sansa too followed. On the horse. He's, sleeping. Too tired from all the fighting in the dungeon. Better bring him down and lay him near the fire. My smile stiffened suddenly. If only they knew why their father was down and out like a corpse, then maybe I wouldn't be getting any more hugs in the future. Chapter 58. Towards north we go. When we rode north, under clouded skies and fading stars. The city was far behind us now, and with each mile we put between us and King's Landing, I felt the weight on my shoulders ease, but only a little. Ned Stark still lay in the cart behind me, wrapped in a cloak, unconscious. Bless Syrio to even bothering to bring a cart, otherwise I might have had to share a horse with him throughout the journey. Unfortunately, the man refused to travel with us any further north. Even for money, he didn't do it. I had suspicions that he only took the task to escort the girls out of a sense of duty and not exactly money. Though that was exactly why I asked for his help, knowing what kind of person he was, knowing his actions in the series. Arya wasn't happy, of course, when he decided to leave, but we can't tie him up with us. Staying with us is dangerous enough. I can't push him to do it. Arya too understood the matter. So now we were only 4 people, 2 girls and 1 man unconscious. If this wasn't me and anyone else, then perhaps this situation could have been very dangerous indeed. I doubt anyone from King's Landing especially would try to ambush us while I'm here. I should have left quite an impression, at least that was the plan. Used up all my saved up points. Had 3 upgrade points left after winning the tourney, killing Baelish, and finally using Varys to free that faceless man, and ended up using all of them to upgrade all 3 attributes. Godly body at LVL2 and thunder at LVL2 didn't show that much difference to me. Of course, I got strong physically and channeling lightning got easier for me. However, the massive lightning bolt I used wasn't the lightning which I generated, that is still not strong enough. It was the thunder brought down from the sky with the combined effort of my LVL2 thunder stats and LVL3 Mjolnir. Mjolnir, though, there I finally saw a big upgrade. The hammer can fly now. I can't fly yet, it's still lacking much power for me to soar through the skies, but still, Now I can throw the bloody hammer for some sort of long-range attack and summon it back. A critical part of Thor's fighting style which I was lacking. Out of all the upgrades, Mjolnir was the best. I'm still a little skeptical whether all this trouble was worth going through for the old wolf. Though now I at least know why I was so focused on saving him. It again comes back to my word. I promised to save him. This was another example of how this unknown and visible force, maybe magic, influences my decision making. Thor's personality does, but that is something I can control. My instincts, but what happened back in the city was different. I have to be very careful about what I say from now on. At least I know this much. Words have power. Mine specifically. Sighing, I looked back at the man who was the center of all this drama. Still sleeping soundly. I significantly held back while hitting him, so him still being unconscious doesn't make sense. Must be something to do with being in the dungeon all that time. Oh, I'm definitely up for a rather nasty talk when the man wakes up. Arya rode beside me, fidgeting with the reins of her horse. Well, actually, she was sitting on the same horse pulling the cart, just because she wanted to. We, after all, only had 2 horses and I just can't believe the reins of the horse I'm on, in the hands of a 10-year-old girl. You still haven't told us, she said, eyes narrowed. One moment they're about to kill father, and then a storm conveniently hit King's Landing and thunder fell near the execution stage, you take advantage and escape with him. You expect us to believe that? Arya all but glared at me. This was the umpteenth time she had asked me this, and I now began to just ignore her altogether. The girl was perceptive, a little too much for comfort sometimes. I didn't answer. Her stare was sharp, like a blade pressing against my side. Sansa, more quiet but just as curious, was sitting in the cart with her father. Please, my lord, we only wish to know how you saved him. You have our thanks, but it felt like a miracle. I just wish to show my gratitude and nothing more. Sansa asked, as she noticed I finally started to avoid Arya's questioning completely. Maybe she too wished to know how. It matters not, my lady. Consider the 7 conspired with the old gods to bring this boon to life and leave it to that. Mortals are not in any position to question the actions of gods, I said. Your father lives. That is enough. Is it not? Arya huffed. You're hiding something. Besides my overwhelming urge to find a woman and bed her or my dread of being back on a horse for another moon, I assure you there is nothing else. Swear in the name of Odin. Arya sent a glare at me. Odin's beard. What was that? You asked me to swear and thus I did. You know that's not what I mean. Well, I did it now so you must settle with that. Huff. Gotta say, Arya had the heart of a warrior, and might accept my word after a little bit of distracting. But Sansa had been raised on songs and the faith of the 7. My powers would be seen as unnatural, perhaps even wicked. I would not risk planting fear in their hearts when they needed hope. Well, that also depended on what the sleeping man does after he comes back to the land of the living. Follower of the old gods he might be, but I doubt that even Ned Stark would willingly accept someone like me near him, or dare I say near his daughters much willingly. Then, a sound. A low groan from the cart. Ned Stark stirred. Speak of the devil. Father. Ah, Sansa. By the 7, I thought you. Sansa's eyes moistened but she held her composure. What happened? He sat up slowly, wincing, hand going to his head. His gray eyes opened, sharp and confused. He looked around, then spotted me. You, he growled, voice hoarse. You struck me. I turned in my saddle, met his stare. I pride myself as a man of my word. Gave you my word to save you and your daughters. As you can smell, you got your wolf cubs here, unharmed. However, if you recall, I also said that my fist would find your face once we are out of that horrid city. I shrugged. You knocked me down like some traitor, a traitor who saved your life and will be taking you home soon. Quite an honorable traitor I'm turning out to be, won't you say? He scowled but said nothing. Maybe because he partially didn't wish to antagonize a man who can bring down lightning. Both Arya and Sansa, hearing the exchange between us, were baffled, but didn't ask any questions. We need to talk. Ned Stark seemed like he wished to cut me open and see for himself whether I was some sort of eldritch monstrosity in the hide of a human, but he refrained from openly discussing what happened back in the city. You'll have your answers, Stark. However, For now, rest. Gather your strength. We are still in the Crownlands. Entering the Riverlands should be our main priority right now. To this, the man grunted and lay back down. I suppose I should thank you. I owe you in this regard, he said finally, after his eyes once again fell to his two daughters. Their safety was the most important to him. Chapter 59. Aftermaths. Winterfell. Catelyn Stark sat on the cold stone bench inside the small sept of Winterfell, made especially for her after she got married up in the south to the Lord Paramount of the North. Being from the Riverlands, she had grown up praying with the religion of the Seven, and even after marriage, she didn't turn her worship to the old gods. She was lucky in this regard, she married a lord who didn't have her convert her religion. So every time she prayed here she found herself blessed to have the only sept in the entire north, all for herself. However, today was different, she sat with her hands clasped tight in prayer. The soft light of the candles flickered against the walls, casting long shadows around her. She had been there for hours now, whispering to the seven, begging them to watch over her son. Ever since Robb's letter arrived, she had known no peace. Bran, her sweet, brave boy, had been found at Castle Black, but then he vanished again. Gone without a trace, and not alone. Robb had written that the Hound had disappeared at the same time. There was no doubt who did it. Catelyn's heart ached with worry while a mother's fury was boiling inside her. It was times like this when she wished to be born as a man. At least she could go after her child and find him. She asked the seven to protect her son, to guide him back to her. She promised them offerings, prayers, and devotion. Anything if only they would return Bran safe. It was on one of these sorrowful days, when Catelyn was once again kneeling before the altar, that a servant came rushing into the sept. The young man looked pale, his hands shaking slightly as he held out a folded piece of parchment. My lady, he said, bowing low. A raven. The message is unknown but for your eyes only. Catelyn rose quickly, snatching the letter from his hand, not sure who sent it or why, but to a grieving mother, anything which mildly looked like a hope to find her son was a treasure. Fear gripped her heart before she even broke the seal though. The message could bring hope as at the same time it could bring the same amount of desperation and fear at times. She didn't recognize the wax. No sigil. Plain and simple, meant to not draw attention. Her fingers trembled as she opened it. Her eyes raced over the words. And then, she froze. Ned. Captured. She read the words again, hardly believing them. Her husband, her strong, loyal Ned, was declared as a traitor by those Lannisters. Betrayed and thrown into chains. There was nothing more in the letter, it was so plain even believing the words written in it was questionable. Catelyn sat back heavily on the bench, the letter falling from her hand. First Bran, and now Ned. Her family was being torn apart piece by piece, and she was powerless to stop it. She didn't wish to believe it, however, when the mind only sees dark, it gets blind to the light existing in the world. Tears welled in her eyes, but she bit them back. Sir Roderick, he must know something, she muttered to herself and got up. Being a woman, she had no hand in politics, but to a battle-hardened man like Sir Roderick who was the master at arms at Winterfell for years, he must know something. He might be able to prove the message's validity. King's Landing. The city of King's Landing was in chaos after Thor left. The streets were filled with shouting and fear. Word of what happened spread faster than a new sexual disease does from the whorehouse. Everyone spoke of the man with golden hair who summoned lightning from the sky and crushed the entire King's Landing guards like they were nothing. Many no longer thought of him as a man at all. Some whispered that he was a god. Others said he was a demon sent to destroy them all. The Sept of the Seven were the most vocal about it, they moved quickly. The High Septon and his priests, who hated anything to do with magic or strange powers, declared Thor a heretic and a spawn of a demon almost immediately. From the steps of the Great Sept, they preached to the common folk, telling them Thor was a threat to all good and faithful men. They promised that the gods would strike him down if the crown did not. Same old tactics used from generation to generation to control the masses. Inside the Red Keep, the mood was even darker. Cersei and Joffrey had been taken back to the castle by what few guards remained loyal. Cersei sat alone in her chambers, her face pale, her hands trembling though she tried to hide it. Her mind would not stop playing the memories over and over. The flash of blinding light. The hammer flying through the air. The thunder that cracked the sky itself. She never was a woman particularly afraid of anything, but all that changed when her firstborn died. She shuddered, remembering the death of her firstborn son. The boy had died on a stormy night, lightning striking her boy, and the seven took his life. That was when she realized what fear really is. She wouldn't say this to anyone, not even her brother, that she had ever since then been afraid of the thunder and the omen it brings, that it reminded her of that dreadful night. Tears burned in her eyes, but she refused to cry. Instead, her mind turned back to the old prophecy she had heard as a child. The witch's voice echoed in her ears, warning of her children's deaths and her own fall. A knock came at her door. Without waiting for an answer, Varys entered, his robes whispering over the floor. The spider had been missing during the whole ordeal, nowhere to be found when Thor attacked. He was too busy looking out for the whereabouts of Stark's daughters, which he couldn't find either. Good, otherwise he might have not survived, though maybe he would have, since Thor had to open his mouth and give his word about not harming anyone there. My queen, Varys said, bowing low. I have heard the reports. I fear this Thor is a danger we cannot ignore. Cersei said nothing, staring out the window toward the sky. She wasn't even paying attention to the man. I might have a way to find him. Varys, seeing no reaction, continued carefully. The city's defenses are weak, and my little birds heard about songs of rebellions coming from Stormland, Highgarden, and even the Vale. That man was loyal to Eddard Stark, and once Lord Stark reaches the north, he shall too will call for his banners. Varys said, and again no reaction from the queen. This was getting on his nerves. If this were to happen, then that means that that man too will be an enemy of the crown. With the backing of an entire army. Varys put more heat, trying to rile the wounded lioness up. At that, Cersei finally turned her head. Her eyes were cold and empty. Leave, she said. Varys blinked, thrown off by her flat voice. But, my queen, get out, she shouted, rising from her chair with sudden rage. Varys pursed his lips but bowed again, deeper this time, and backed out of the room without another word. Cersei didn't wish to listen about Thor or anything now. She was too shaken to enter into a political game now. A very rare time in her life when she found herself this weak emotionally. And even Jaime wasn't here with her. As Varys walked back through the stone halls of the Red Keep toward his own chambers, his mind boiled with frustration. He had planned Thor's death carefully. Using the secret tunnels under the city, he had set traps. Everything had been perfectly arranged. And yet that man had survived. More than survived. He had burst forth stronger than ever, bringing down the fury of the heavens themselves. Varys hated magic. It reminded him too much of his own painful past, the cruel wizard who had cut him and left him broken. And now Thor, a man wielding magic far greater than anything he had seen, was free and walking in Westeros. As Varys reached his chambers, he made a silent vow. He would find a way to kill Thor, no matter how long it took. Men who could call down the storm had no place in the world he wished to build. However, just as he was about to open the door, he heard someone say the words he was very familiar with as someone from Essos. Valar Morghulis. And a shiver went down his spine when he heard these words. Chapter 60. Tidings Vale. It took Hugh many days to finally reach the Vale. The narrow mountain paths were hard, and the gates of the moon were heavily guarded. But Hugh had nowhere to go. The only place he could get safety from the crown if the queen decided to go after him would be the Vale. He needed to meet Lady Lysa Arryn, and he would not leave until he did. It took another few days of waiting before he was allowed an audience. The nobles of the Vale did not think much of Hugh even after Jon Arryn took him as his squire, for he was only a former squire, a lowborn boy who once served their late Lord Jon Arryn. When he was finally brought before Lady Lysa, Hugh was surprised. She sat on her high chair in the great hall, her young son Robert on her lap. To Hugh's discomfort, she was still nursing the boy, though he looked far too old for it. Lady Lysa looked down at Hugh with a frown. What do you want, boy? She said coldly. You were Jon's squire. Nothing more. You have no place here. Hugh bowed low but kept his voice steady. I come with tidings, my lady. Tidings of Petyr Baelish. The moment Hugh spoke Baelish's name, Lysa froze. Her lips pursed, her arms tightening around her son. You dare speak of him? She snapped. Petyr is far from here. He serves the crown in King's Landing. Hugh swallowed, then reached into his satchel and carefully pulled out a small bundle. Inside were a few ornaments. A ring, a brooch, items Hugh had taken from Baelish's chambers after Thor's plan was set in motion. He laid them on the floor before her. Lady Lisa stared at them, her face slowly crumbling. She knew these pieces. She had given some of them to Petter herself, long ago. No, she whispered, her voice breaking. What happened? Assassination, my lady. Tears welled up in her eyes. She clutched Robert to her chest and began to weep openly, not caring who saw. No one else knew the truth, but deep in her heart, she did. Petter Baelish was not just a man she once loved, he was the true father of her son. Hugh waited until her sobs slowed before speaking again. His voice was low, careful. It was the Lannisters, my lady, he said. I don't know why they did it but had some vendetta against him. They learned something which I don't know of. I only know that they talked about some debt which I couldn't place. Lisa lifted her tear-stained face, her eyes burning with anger now. The Lannisters, she hissed. She knew Baelish was plotting against them. He even had her send a letter to her sister in Winterfell. But how did they find out? Hugh felt a small pang of guilt for lying. But Thor had saved his life and trusted him to carry out this plan. He would see it done, if not for anything then for his own life. The Vale had to go against the crown if he wished to have any chance to live. Otherwise, that mad queen would hunt him down. She wouldn't stop at anyone who knew of her secret. Lisa wiped her eyes and stood, her body shaking with rage. The Lannisters will pay for what they have done. Castle Black days passed, and still there was no sign of Bran. Robb, Jon searched every path, every tree line, every cave they could find, but Bran was gone as if the wind had carried him away. Apparently, one team found some clues about them but couldn't pursue them since a direwolf ended up interfering. They didn't believe it. It had been ages since anyone had spotted a direwolf up in the north. The best guess was that those men were drunk or making stories to end the search early. After all, who would wish to continue searching for someone in the bone-chilling conditions of the north? Jon's face was grim under the hood of his black cloak. Robb, Jon said, his voice low and certain, I think they crossed the wall. Robb frowned and shook his head. How could they? The only entrance is at Castle Black, and even if they found another way, like one of those wildlings, remember that Bran going with that bloody son of a bitch was only an estimation at best till now. Them crossing the wall is highly unlikely. Jon kept his gaze ahead. Then where else could they have gone? There is no going south of here. That hound would be hunted like a pig to slaughter by Northmen. He wouldn't go there. He surely ain't here this side of the wall. We searched every possible corner and pit, you know that. Where else could they have gone? Jon said with a little heat in his tone, trying to pass the point across. Robb muttered under his breath. He didn't wish to believe it or even think about it, but there really was no other way they could not have found the two. Do you think we should send a team beyond the wall? Robb asked, genuinely not knowing much about the workings of Castle Black and the men who take the Black. There's already a team that went out with Uncle Benjen. Convincing Lord Commander Mormont wouldn't be easy. Jon sighed. I'll talk to him. Robb had a determined face. No matter what, he would do what it took to bring his brother back. Suddenly, hoofbeats broke the silence. One of Robb's men came riding hard toward them, his breath a mist in the freezing air. He carried a small scroll bound to a raven's leg. A bird, my lord, the man said, handing the scroll to Robb. From Winterfell. Robb took it quickly, his fingers numb from the cold. He broke the seal and unfolded the paper. His eyes moved over the words once, then again, slower this time. His face went pale, and his hand tightened on the reins until the leather creaked. Jon noticed it at once. What is it? For a moment, Robb said nothing. He just stared at the letter like it might change if he looked long enough. Robb, Jon pressed. Robb swallowed hard, his voice rough. Father's been taken captive in King's Landing. The words hit like a hammer. Jon felt like the breath had been knocked from his chest. He blinked against the biting wind. Taken captive. How? Why? Robb shook his head. It doesn't say how. Only that King Robert is dead and father is now a prisoner of Queen Cersei and her boy King. Jon cursed under his breath. The Lannisters, he growled. Robb crushed the letter in his hand, his jaw tight with fury. Mother has called for the banners. I have to go back to Winterfell. I'll come with. No. Robb immediately denied, and Jon looked at him with confusion and contemplation. You're a black now, Snow. Your duty is here. Jon's face clenched at this. He wished to retort, to say that Ned Stark was his father too, but he couldn't. Because he knew his reality. Winterfell needs a Stark to bring father back home. Jon's tightly pursed lips didn't loosen and he gave a sharp nod. And a Stark is needed here at the wall to bring Bran back. Jon's head all but jerked up to Robb. Can I leave Bran to you? Robb asked, looking Jon straight into his eyes. He's my brother too. Bring me good news, Snow. Expect the same from you, Stark. And before they knew it, both were once again in each other's embrace like the brothers they were.
Another tale fades into the silence. But here, in the fantasy audiobook library, stories never sleep. Subscribe and return when your heart seeks adventure. We'll be waiting.